Chapter 28. Red Worm in a Dove Grey Heart. There is something in this feeling, bittersweet and angry and desperate. The vampire runs teeth across dry lips, can almost feel the pulse of life under tongue, a crashing oceanic storm, electric and fierce and alive. Rapture, waiting under a thin barrier of flesh, waiting for its release to flay them alive. Flay them alive, the vampire silently laughed. Flay them to life with each painful pulse. They had to taste. Just one taste, to know what it was to be that level of alive, hold that level of creation. They had followed the scent of that power for months, tracked it to its source with slow, meticulous days. They were dying, all of them, some more slowly than others. They moved through life and forgot, a sharp and steady decline of forgotten days. There was no true childhood, no unique birth, no perfect creation. They were monsters walking in the shell of a man, moving man's hands and man's feet to do monsters' work. Looking out of human eyes and speaking human words, thinking in human thoughts. They can all smell it so strongly now, that power, a force that licks at their skin with painful shocks, a vicious warning that what was inside such a storm would surely kill them, finish the task of their death in one rapturous moment. The vampire's nose burned, skin aflame from the brief touch of such power. The family waited, shaking, their own magic, its own hunting storm. They surrounded a force that could sustain them if only it would open itself up and die for them. The wolves chased the moon by killing. The vampires chased after life by taking it. Theirs was not a true life. They had no life. They were nothing. Puppets held alive by dark magic from ages past that no one left could remember clearly. The ones they drank from, willing or unwilling, if left alive, were tainted by that death. A poison that seeped inside of them and made them into mutants. Stronger, their life sustained by half its normal length. No disease touched them, magical or mundane. Their bodies forgot to age for a time. They became pristine, blood clear as water from a spring brook. Mutants who gave up a portion of their life so that the vampires might live. Fuel to run a body that only took and never gave back. Life, but for a time. Only for a time. The vampire cut the man's skin with sharpened nails, watched the blood bloom and spill over long fingers, heard the family sigh with longing. So much power, just a taste, just a small drink to seal the bond and make him theirs, ours, us. Nothing so sweet could be savored, though. The blood burned like exquisite fire in the veins, and down the vampire fell, contorting with pure pleasure and sharp pain alike. Never had there been its like. Almost it might kill them. Almost it could resurrect them in truth. But the power was taken from them by its own hand, leaving behind only supreme desperation. With it went what semblance of hope they had, the small sustenance they had paid dearly for days before. The vampire was empty, a husk, a cadaver, a loose bundle of memories with no tether, thoughts drifting away like leaves in a fall wind. Help us, they might have said, brothers and sisters flocking over one another with anxious gazes and slight touches. Help us remember. Save us from ourselves. They could have killed you. She was mad at him, her color a rushing, flashing storm of light. Her voice, however, was calm, matter of fact. He would rather she be shouting at him. I didn't realize what was going on until it happened. One blue-violet light slashed through the air in a rapid movement, the quick gesture of dismissal showing the violence her voice did not. Not what I meant, and you know it. You went to the Krupp to see a vampire, not even healed. You went to Nocturne Alley, alone. Her voice rose at the last note, and Harry slumped into a chair. You're right. You could have been, she paused, sucked in a deep breath. I'm right. Harry lifted his shoulders in a shrug, smiled up at her half-heartedly. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'm trying to decide if that was because I was emotional or because of the compulsion abilities the vampires must possess. If compulsion is what it can be called. I still doubt whether it was my own mental reasoning or if it was tainted. Or at least what degree of taint. She moved closer, sat beside him. He saw her wand fall into her hand from its holster, her magic rising to wash over his cheek with a gentle incantation. A cleansing charm, followed by a minor healing spell. Hermione sighed. Do you want me to run a diagnostic? Harry thought it over for a moment, then nodded. He leaned back as Hermione stood, light fierce, wand raised. He let himself bathe in her light as she cast her spells, one rapidly followed by another, the Latin words meticulously spoken, each movement of her hand precise. Nothing, she finally murmured. That I can tell anyway, I'm no expert. There was a swirl of yellow light. and Crocken appeared, a Bangladesh green hand in his grip. Vaughn sprang away from the house elf, and he did not waste time with projected calm. What happened? Fallen is still out searching your campus grounds. We couldn't locate you with standard charms. Harry filed that information away, along with the many random puzzle piece facts he had assembled on the nature of vampires. Creature is getting him. Sit, and I'll explain as best I can. Or better yet, Harry stood, motioned towards the library. I'll show you. Maybe you'll notice something I did not. Fallen and Vaughn viewed the memory 3 times. Harry left them to it after the first, sitting back in the library while Hermione paced the shelves, mumbling to herself about various tomes that might hold some vital nugget of information on the living dead. She was angry, but also just as curious as he. Harry had understood the political wishes of the vampires for more civil rights and freedom. No one wanted murderers to go unpunished, or for murder to be excused because the one killed was considered a second-class citizen. But vampires were also no longer actively hunted, hadn't been for decades. There were laws in place to ensure vampires could attain sustenance from willing donors. They shouldn't be starving, and their race shouldn't be dying off. Why was the vampire in the alley so desperate? Mr. Brendan was hiding something, something vital, living death. The alley vampire used those words. Mr. Brendan had said something similar, not pleasant to spend life dying. There wasn't enough detailed information on vampires available. The ministry knew more than was officially published. Fallen had admitted as much to him when he was questioning the creature's time manipulation abilities. But the government chose to hide much of what it knew for reasons only Scrimgeour could tell him. Was that motivation simply to keep the public happy and unafraid? The wizarding world was full of monsters, vampires not the worst of them. Living death. The words circled in his mind, around and around and around. He could feel the idea growing in his mind, an idea, a thought, a connection. The dead could not be resurrected. It was universal fact, a law of magic. Dead bodies could be animated in fairy and zombies. Souls could return to wander incorporeal in the form of ghosts. Vampires had no souls that he could see. Instead, Harry could see the colorful remnants of the ones they fed off of, sustaining them in floods and trickles of life. Black flesh. A birth without life. We have time. Time, blood, life. We will be alive again. Black flesh, living death. The way his own blood had sunk into that black flesh, a pattern he hadn't been able to clearly see until his own light began to change it. No, it hadn't been changing it at all. The ugly thing he had seen, the incomplete pattern, was a vampire's true pattern. Dead flesh isn't black. Harry spoke the words aloud, feeling cold running through his veins, the hair at his nape prickling. What? Hermione turned, a frown in her voice. Dead flesh. It's white. Cadavers in fairy zombies too, I assume. A white husk, empty of live blood and soul. She approached slowly, and he knew she made the connection when her color flashed. She was just as brilliant as he, if not more so. Vampires aren't dead. Harry stood abruptly, began to pace himself, energy flooding through him as if he stood at the edge of a cliff. The edge of discovery, more like, and the rush of it was far greater than any jump he could take. They're alive, but flawed. The pattern, I can't see it. It's black on black. Black like dark magic, but more carbon than licorice, if I have my colors correct. Not quite the bottomless shade the Hallows can take on. But something happened when it tasted my blood. Either my blood is not compatible due to the Hallows, or when it attempted to make a bond the process failed for the same reason. I'm certain the collapse was not a planned part of whatever ritual it was attempting. The green light. Harry needed to see it again. He approached the silver pensieve, its magic swirling with the presence of his 2 guards within. He touched the liquid and let himself be pulled down into its magic, the memory of when he stood in the crop appearing around him in bright streams of color. Vaughn and Fallen turned, but Harry spared no time for explanations. He mentally manipulated the memory with the ease of long practice, rewinding time until he stood again in the mundane alley, the black shadows of the vampire coven arrayed around him. The leader, if it was the leader, stood in front of his own body, its form nearly indistinct from the surroundings. Harry stepped closer, trying to catalogue the exact shade of the magical creature. Not true black emptiness, not like what lay inside the Hallows. There was a sort of fullness there, a heavy presence that was backed up by the heat he remembered feeling emanating from its form. The vampire was lifting a hand, One moment still as a stone and paces away, the next right up in front of where he had been standing. Carbon black, with blue and purple blood remnants from a previous feeding. Carbon black nails that appeared wickedly sharp in contrast when those nails pierced his body's emerald skin, only bare inches away from the bloody red horcrux across his brow. A horcrux whose presence he now realized his guards could not have missed, something to consider later. The emerald color flooded out from the shallow cut, pulsing with life and light and magic. And as the vampire lifted the dripping hand to its mouth, Harry stepped even closer, watching with every odor of his concentration, waiting, green light, with brighter verdant shadows and dark jade stars within it, beginning to soak into that thick carbon flesh, sinking in, lighting it up, making it new, number Harry thought, forcing himself to move past previous conclusions. There is nothing new here. The pattern that formed in those brief moments was wrong, fractured in layers deeper than mere skin, down to bone, down to the heart that didn't beat, the mind that held no unique, colorful soul. A human pattern at its core, and that explained much more than it didn't, like why it was possible for half-vampires to exist. Soulless and lifeless, but alive. And if it can have no life and still live, then it can have no soul and still think and reason and feel emotion. The moment passed, as his blood was forcefully pulled away from the creature that had fallen to the rough concrete ground. Harry stared dully down as he watched himself pull away what little life had been inside the pitiful creature. That had probably felt like torture, if it was not an outright death sentence. A tinge of remorse flooded him, but he pushed it aside. He was the one the vampire had attempted to force into a blood pact, oath, bond, or whatever the creatures preferred to call that connection. Harry left the memory as quickly as he had entered it, falling into the first chair in his path, hand coming up to cover his face with emerald light. A human pattern warped out of its humanity, unable to die, unable to live, stuck in vertigo in a paradox. A human pattern that cannot make its own life, cannot hold its own soul. A failed experiment, or a successful one. It wasn't natural, of that he was certain. Nature played by rules, and immortality was not one of them. Even phoenixes, one of the rare beings capable of such, went through cyclical periods of death and rebirth, times of renewal. Harry dropped his hands when he heard movement, looked up at Hermione as she came to a stop beside his chair. I think we need to hear their story, and sooner rather than later. Not used to worrying much about Lord Potter's safety. Fallen muttered into his cup, the Exora swirling the liquid inside with a restless movement. I suppose I was beginning to fall prey to the public sentiment that he's invincible. Yeah, Vaughn agreed, eyes closed. And what a whopper of a memory. Couldn't understand much of what I was seeing at first. I can't imagine seeing all that all the time. I still feel nauseous. Fallen grunted agreement, took a quick sip before placing the cup down solidly on the table. It was late, grim old place as silent as a tomb, their respective charges safe upstairs. It had been agreed upon to return to Nocturne the next day, in the late afternoon twilight hours when the alley was just beginning to stir to life. We'll have the advantage of numbers tomorrow. Vaughn mused aloud. That's something at least. A snort. 4-1, good enough odds, I suppose, except there is never only one vampire. Vaughn grinned at Fallen's comment. Was that a quote from old Mad-Eye Moody? Fallen lifted his cup in salute. The one and only, and he always had good advice. The best. Vaughn agreed and sat up with a smile. But don't discount the house elves. I put 10 galleons on Kraken in a duel with any mere magical creature. I heard rumors he once kicked 3 hags out of his owner's shop with one spell. I heard, and I wouldn't take that bet. Fallen shook his head before standing resolutely. Best enjoy what might be my last sleep. Vaughn laughed at the dour comment. So melodramatic. I can still curse your arse, boy. Fallen muttered as he walked from the room. Don't tempt me. Vaughn held his tongue until he heard the telltale sound of the flue being activated. Then he grinned into the open air. Wouldn't dream of it, Princess. Harry woke to a soft knock on the door, creature speaking a single word into the following silence. Ethanon. Hermione moved restlessly beside him as he slipped carefully out of the bed, his feet only lightly thumping to the floor. In a matter of moments he was dressed, the purple Graphorn armor tucked in one hand. What time is it? He asked as soon as he entered the living room, moving toward the flue as the exhaustion of a restless night fought to muddle his mind. 5 in the morning, a familiar female voice said, as Ethan's resolution blue soul rose from his couch. "This is a personal favor." Harry paused and quietly placed the purple armor onto the nearest chair. "Your bodyguard let me through the front door. I'm not in my armor." Harry could see that well enough. Only the mundane shades of plant fibers clothed her, with a light dusting of red charms laced over the shoes on her feet. Anti-slip charms, perhaps. At his silence, Ethan uncrossed her blue arms and wavered a moment before speaking again. "This isn't official. Don't use my title. Just call me Hato, please." "Okay." Harry agreed and waited, the after-effects of sleep lingering in his gruff voice. "What's wrong?" She seemed to be considering something, her light flickering with each rapid beat of her heart. He found himself counting those beats, considering her flawless human pattern, the newest conclusion about vampires passing through his thoughts. How broken that vampire had been, in ways that couldn't be fixed easily, even with a perfect pattern to base their transformation off of. "There is a person close to me. She's young, just a child, really. She's been cursed by that doesn't matter. The healers at St. Mungo's say the only treatment is a particular series of transfigurations they are brutal, painful. I've seen grown men go through it, and with the consequences, she stumbled to a halt, and he was not used to hearing her voice sound so uncertain, her words an erratic mix of misdirection and fact. "I'm not a healer," Harry said, and saw the blue liquid light gathering on her face. Tears, just 3 reluctant droplets. Beautiful crystalline light that rose up and fell down solid cheeks. Like crystal blue on deeper resolution blue light, a sight he wished he couldn't see, knowing it would embarrass her for anyone to see her distraught. "I know." Her voice gained the strength it has lost, a thread of command returning. "I understand that, but I wouldn't feel right if I didn't ask you to look, to see." She lifted one hand to her face, the movement hasty as she wiped away the evidence of her tears. "The operation is at 6. They have to move fast before it reaches her heart. We'll take the flu," he said, and didn't give her time to thank him as he moved towards the large fireplace. "Tell me about the curse." He heard her take a deep breath, light jerking in a firm nod. "Hurry." The girl lay on green sheets, the fabric soft to his touch as he absently ran a finger across their surface. Her hue was among the most beautiful he had seen. It could be called dove gray, but it held a sheen of white that gave its light a silver gleam. It reminded him of a Muggle professor from his past, who had held a pearlescent light that set her apart from the typical colors he was used to in human souls. He knew of no reason that few possessed that gleam. It could be a type of magical creature heritage, or a genetic trait in the body that was separate from the soul. It could be something special about the soul, something that made the light burn brighter, stronger. Except the grey light that slept in front of him was fading, losing its special gleam, the sparkle being sucked out by the deep red light that crouched inside her chest like a gluttonous worm, wiggling and gnawing away at her magic. It was a dark curse, one rarely encountered by the average citizen, especially children. He hadn't asked why this young girl had been hit with it, or how. He hadn't had the heart to ask, when by asking he might inadvertently heap more weight onto Ethan's already slumped shoulders. It was called Nutricatus, which was also the incantation. The Latin itself was innocent enough. It spoke of a child being nursed, suckling at the breasts of a mother for nutrition, for life. But some dark wizards of the ancient past had had another idea. They had created a spell that latched onto the magic inside a witch or wizard and ate it away, one sickening slurp at a time, a process that was as painful as it sounded, until no magic was left. When the magic was gone, the curse took the life of its victim as a last prize. And despite the amazing healing advantages of the wizarding world, the only way to save a Nutricatus victim was to remove the source it fed upon. Luckily for most auras, Nutricatus was notoriously difficult to cast, and not a curse most would favor in combat, as its effects could take months to culminate. It had been a good weapon for magical assassination, however, especially upon Muggle targets, who with no magic to consume would slowly fade away day by day, with a slight fever that never abated until it claimed their life. Harry looked at the red worm, wrapped tightly around the young dove-grey heart, and felt the horror of it deep inside himself. The things men create to kill each other, to torture. The ingenuity required, the genius, to even create this spell, and all of it wasted on dark magic that benefited no one. "Can you help her?" Soft, feminine words from the doorway. It was the quiet time given to family members to visit their sick kin before they were operated upon. No one at St. Mungo's knew he was here with her, a fact Ethanon had ensured when she put an invisibility charm over him and led him blindly through the sterile halls. She hadn't known the charm blinded him. He had followed the sound of her steps, his staff a steady, soft staccato to match the click of her boots, rather than give his weakness away. Harry lifted his hand from the green sheets to lay it gently on the child's stomach, just under the main bulk of the curse. He could see where it had first burrowed under skin on her abdomen, red residue left behind like a slimy trail. He wasn't a healer. He didn't like dabbling with the human body, especially in front of others. He could transfigure the light inside of her, but the consequences would be just as dangerous. The body wasn't meant to have something inside it that did not belong. He wasn't afraid he would kill her permanently. But he had no desire for Ethanon to see the consequences should he have to resurrect her body if it failed. However, Harry considered the curse again, went through what knowledge Ethanon had given him while they stood in this room, time clicking steadily by. Remove what fed the worm, and the worm would die. So simple, really. It's what the wizards planned to do, removing her magic strip by painful strip, and the worm would leave her body along with the magic, eating it even as it was coaxed out of her body to follow the source of its sustenance. But there was another way for magic to leave the body. "You need to leave the room. I can't be distracted." His voice was firm, but she didn't move. "Will it hurt her?" He didn't hesitate. "She won't feel a thing." Light jerked in a nod before she whirled and left with quick strides. They didn't have much time, and she knew it as well as he did. He needed to fix her and get out of there before anyone suspected his involvement in what would be another miraculous recovery. Alone, he locked the door with a splash of magic and took in a deep breath, memorizing the sight of her soul, its silver-gray gleam, so unique and perfect. Then he stopped the steady pulse of that light. An alarm began to sound from her bedside. He killed it with a glance. The red worm began to thrash. The girl was so small and still. She had to be younger than 5. Her corpse lay there, her soul still inhabiting her body even as her life was gone. The soul sometimes lingered a long time after the body died. Days, even. Other times it began to fade away almost instantly. Her soul seemed determined to stay. It clung to the flesh around it, a steady hue with none of the flashes and flickers of a heart beating. No breath stirred the air, no sound of her gentle snores. The red worm was thrashing wildly now, its pulses flickering up and down her body, seeking heat as her body cooled. A maw seemed to open, tendrils of red light like teeth as it sank its fangs again and again and again into her with no results. If she had been alive, those magical bites would no doubt hurt her. But a corpse feels nothing. No nerves sending signals to the brain. No pain receptors alive and functioning. Magical ability was tied to the body, not the soul. It was a theory he had reached early on, though he had never performed experiments that might prove it true or false. The wizarding world probably wasn't ready for a muggle's soul to be placed into a brain-dead magical body, after all. If what he thought might happen did, and to be able to change a muggle body into a magical one. If he figured out that secret, the subtle nuances between the two, with enough study, the worm died. Its red light shredding as it began to eat itself, an Ouroboros of dark magic. A knock at the wood of the door behind him, a soft reminder that he had no time to contemplate the future. He leaned close, assuring himself that no flicker of red remained. Then with a push of his own life, he started her own, her chest rising under his hand with a deep, sudden breath. Her light jumped and flickered and roared to full iridescence, the silver gleam that ringed its dove-grey life so bright he squinted and stepped away. She gasped in the air and trembled to wakefulness, bolting up in bed with the speed of the young. Time to go. He called for the cloak, and it rose from where it was tied at his neck, wrapping closely about him like a pet snake as he backed into a corner, simultaneously unlocking the door. It burst open, the sound of familiar boots clicking into the room at a rapid pace. "Marie." Her voice was strained with emotion. "Aunt Harto, Aunt Harto." A high young voice, fear etched raw in every syllable. "Where's Mummy, Aunt Harto?" He heard the rustle of sheets, heard the sound of the older woman gathering the younger into her arms, her voice soft and gentle. Marie SHHH, Mummy's gone, remember? She went to heaven last year. Everything is going to be all right. A sniffle followed by a sob, classic signs of a child beginning to fall apart. He shifted in the corner, staff in one arm, feeling like the intruder he was. But I saw her. She was here with Jesus. I saw her Aunt Hato. Harry blinked at those words. Apparently the child was religious, and he was certain she hadn't had time to see him as if he looked anything like a guard. Oh, Marie. Ethan only said softly, I'm sorry, you've been sick, darling, very sick. Another sniff, then two. They were both crying. Harry tamped down a groan. Shouldn't they be celebrating or something? She was saved. More footsteps rushing in from the hall, with the clashing smells of strong coffee and wet dog. Mrs. Karazu, please, we need to scan her. She should be deep into the healing coma before we operate. Please, just. Rustling, following by incantations. Shocked breaths, whispers to a colleague, with Ethan's soothing words to the young girl a constant backdrop. The one who smelled like black coffee spoke in a foreign accent, the deep male voice confused. I'm sorry, Mrs. Karazu, but there has been a change. In her condition, it appears the curse has resolved itself naturally without our interference. Her magic, softly spoken, as if the child in her arms couldn't hear them. Whole, she's as healthy as a young magical child should be. I saw my mummy. Marie declared proudly, the shock apparently giving way to a child's impeccable ability to state things he would personally rather be kept quiet. He was never having children. I was dead, and Mummy held my hand and told me she loved me. She was on the big ferry boat to the island and dressed in her favorite red kimono and her favorite white pearls Daddy gave her when I was born. I wanted to get on the boat with her, but Jesus was there, and she said I couldn't come yet. That I wasn't dead after all. An incredulous pause. He could imagine the raised eyebrows or eye rolls that were currently being exchanged among the adults in the room. The man cleared his throat. Ah, vivid dreams are typical during the magical coma. We should do more scans, be certain that there is no. It wasn't a dream. The girl said stubbornly, Mummy was there, but Jesus doesn't look like he does in my books. In fact, he looked. For the first time, the girl sounded skeptical herself. Harry crossed his fingers. He could use a little luck that she wouldn't describe her Jesus with the same thoroughness she described her deceased mother. Apparently, Ethan realized the shaky ground they stood on as well. Lay back, Marie. Let the healers look at you. I need to check on a friend. I'll only be a moment. She didn't protest that he could hear. He needed to get out of the room now. He heard heels click by and slid out behind them, walking forward into the black-white void of the cloak as it swirled at his heels, not daring to touch his staff to the floor. He counted the steps out as he counted them in, focusing on every sound around them to prevent running into a passing patient or healer. Ethan stopped 5 steps short from the outside flue. Her voice was a low murmur. I won't ask what you did, but thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I won't forget this. She turned, walking away with the sharp stride of an aura on a mission, not waiting for his reply. He shook his head under the cloak and stepped to the flue, listening before sliding the silk off his face, just enough to see the round powder container. With a flash of magical fire, he was gone, to hopefully fall back into his warm bed. The next evening the house elves took them to the street in Nocturne Alley, the 2 yellow sources of magic spreading out at their back as the wizards approached the crop. Mr. Brandon waited for them at his green oak counter, no surprise in his voice when he spoke. Follow. Harry could see the tension in the people around him, in the way the 2 guards held themselves stiff, wands cradled in semi-raised hands, in the way Hermione threaded her own hand through his for a brief squeeze, her skin uncharacteristically cold. Only Creature and Kraken appeared unaffected, the 2 house elves mirroring each other with the same rigidly polite stance they held at Grimmauld Place. The vampire led them through the silent store, into a back room that shimmered with white magic as brightly as any wizarding wards he had ever seen. He could make out multiple magical signatures, but none that he could recognize from people he had met. The vampire stood in the center of the white room and didn't ask anyone to sit. There were no chairs that he could see anyway. It's our legend. The vampire began with no preamble or questions about the presence of the others. It is told to us in this way every year that passes by, to the young and the old, to those who can't remember by those who can. Hermione's hand tightened in his grip. Brandon took an audible breath, his words falling into rhythmic tones. In ancient times, thousands of years before wizards first laid hands onto wands, there was a place, deep in the earth, a cave that those who magic sang to would find and worship the natural rhythms of the world. A place that had such power it called to those across rivers and seas, mountains and deserts. Some who descended to its deeps came back changed, more powerful, more purposeful. Another breath. Others did not return. It was said that the cave was also a tomb, a place some went to die. Only those who died sometimes lingered and spoke with the living, giving away the secrets of life. Such was the power of this place that no blood could be shed, and no tears ever fell within its confines. Enemy tribes would travel there to broker treaties with magic's approval, and victims held hands with their abusers and forgave them. Harry let every word, every potential nuance of information seep into him. This was a place of peace and magnificent power, until it was broken. A hissing growl, deep and guttural, shattered, torn, desecrated. The words spit out, and Harry could imagine young vampires trembling at the words, spoken like curses. A door was created in that place that could not be shut, and the dead ones who lingered were sealed into slavery by its creator. They were the first of us, but they were not like us. They had seen true life and true death both, and they hated what they were made to be by the door. Life brought them excruciating pain and sorrow, every hour and minute and second. So similar to what he knew of the shades he could summon with the stone. So similar he could not help but think it was no coincidence that those he summoned also found the return to life painful. Every year and decade and century. Another pause, Brandon taking a long breath, mournful. As a child, we learned this simple truth. Some places are not meant to be open or shut. Some places are supposed to be simple corridors and hallways, open passages with no barriers or obstacles. The very act of having a door changes the perception of a place into something radically different. Spoken aside to them in simple words before the vampire continued his story. The lingered were forced by the door's creator to make more of themselves, to serve its ever-growing desire to rule the world. And among those children was born one we call Libero Sigillum, the one who broke the seal. Libero slew the creator, but could not destroy its creation. The door remained, but the seal upon it was torn. Triumph, though the sadness remained. Hermione's hand was squeezing his forcefully. She wanted to tell him something, but couldn't yet. The lingered were free, and they left, every single one. They went down through the cave or into the fire or under the water. They let themselves bleed and burn and drown, and they sang songs of joy while they perished. But Libero and the other children did not embrace death, though the still open door called to them constantly. Libero created the law of blood and passed to us all the knowledge that the life inside mortal blood could sustain us, could help us live like mortal men. Blood gave us a semblance of life, allowing us to walk and breathe and create magic of our own. Black hands spread, highlighted vividly against the white walls behind them. But blood was not enough. Libero did not age, but he grew old. He saw what was coming and gave us warning and hope alike. The door would never stop trying to call us, trying to enslave us once again to its purpose. We were forced to create bonds to the living mortals who fed us, bonds of blood and sometimes love, friendships and partnerships to deafen that call. Bonds to tie us ever tighter to life, though it pains us still. Bonds to help us remember, for without them our memory begins to fade, and we forget our long years in life and lose our will to stay. Finally, Harry began to understand the desperation the vampire in the alley had had, the motivation to push him into attempting a bond. But why target Harry directly? Why use the words he had spoken? Mr. Brendan took one last breath, speaking his last part of the tale in a long flood of words. And the hope we were given by Libero, before he could no longer fight with the pain of life, was that another one would come. One with the power to destroy the door completely as he could not, and give us all true life. Not blood or bonds, but hearts that create our own life, and souls that hold our own memories, not shared, not given, not taken. And we would know this one because they would possess the ability to see the door. Without a sight beyond normal sight, it is impossible to destroy it. Sight without seeing, the law says, and the power to create and destroy life itself. Harry felt his blood begin to run cold, dread trickling down his spine. Hermione let go of his hand, and he saw her fiddle restlessly with her wand, shifting foot to foot. Brendan seemed to be waiting for them to speak. When no one did, he continued, his words soft. Some of us seek this one. Others fear its existence. They say such a one who could destroy the door could also create it anew, could bind us into slavery once again, or eradicate us entirely. But we search for them. More of us perish into death every year that passes, unable to live a half-life, not truly alive, nor truly dead. We are in pain, torn apart from the world even as we walk through it. We desire true life, not one drained from others by blood. Silence fell again, and Harry tried to place the vampire's story neatly into what he knew already, and found it fit far too well. The vampire's broken black pattern, the door, which resembled what rumors told of the veil. Even the story of the Roman witch Aelia, found in the ancient scrolls inside Gringotts with the hordes of living dead. But he had no desire to have any portion in the vampire's search for a chosen one. You think Harry is this person? Why? Hermione burst out finally, breaking the silence. Brendan laughed a low hissing chuckle that raised goosebumps up and down Harry's arms. It was a sound one wouldn't want to hear behind them at night in a dark alleyway. He is the blind sorcerer. He kills with a glance and sees without seeing. All unsubstantiated rumors. Fallen spat gruffly to their right, the older guard moving forward to stand at Hermione's side. Oh, the vampire purred. Look at him, wizard. He has been blinded by dark magic, and yet he walks freely. Years ago he decimates countless inferi, and with no spell kills dark wizards. He brings them to their knees and tears the souls from their eyes. Fallen sputtered out a laugh. That's preposterous. No one has said anything about soul magic. Harry stopped listening to the Exora's words as what the vampire had said sunk in. You said these blood barns help you retain memories. Harry broke in, interrupting the beginning of his guard's diatribe. Does this go both ways? He could hear the smile when the vampire replied. Ah, Mr. Hill found himself in financial straits after being let go from the Aura Force for his lack of discretion in relation to the Inferi incident in Muggle London. I took his bond myself. The arrangement had been satisfactory for both of us. Answer enough. Mr. Brendan must have viewed the Aura's memory of that night, which would explain how he knew that Crouch had fallen to his knees before Harry killed him, unless that wording was merely exaggeration. Still, the mention of souls. The vampire had no doubt seen dark magic in his many years, and along with it, soul magic. Could possibly recognize the signs of a soul being torn asunder. After all, such things were often done on purpose in dark rituals of power, like when creating a Horcrux. Harry took a deep breath of his own, tried to figure out how he felt about the vampires, or this coven at least, having some knowledge of his abilities. I see, Harry said softly, and found himself at a loss for more words. Hermione didn't have that problem. Then those vampires in the alley wanted to force Harry to what? Fix them. The vampire moved, though Harry could not see what gesture he made. In short, yes, they grew tired of waiting. Harry shook his head. I can't. I don't even know where to begin with this. Another gesture, a hiss. Simply begin. We will protect you from our own, now that rumor of your potential has spread among our covens. What was broken quickly will not be fixed swiftly. Fallen snorted, grumbling in a low voice. Harry glanced at Hermione's peaceful light, saw it pulsing with emotion. He needed her opinion, needed to know her thoughts on the legend and how it might fit in with their own research. He needed time. I will start research, he said finally. When I am ready, I will need volunteers for study, both vampire and bonded wizards. It will not be a pleasant process trying to, how to say it, what he suspected might need to be done. Fix them. How does one fix broken immortality? Make immortals mortal again, and if the price of feeling no pain, of no longer needing blood, was a loss of that immortality, would the vampires even still want it? The dead he talked to only wanted to be dead again. The living all want to keep living. What would those stuck in between really want? It will be done. Brendan hissed. This we promise on the door. Harry smiled grimly. And first on his list of research was setting his eyes on that bloody veil squatting deep in the Department of Mysteries. Hermione held his hands as they sat together in his laboratory. Their two chairs slid close to one another. Her fingers idly caressed the palm of one of his bare left hand, and he leaned into the motion with a sigh of gratitude. Her voice was calm, methodical. It fits with the story of Aelia. Vampires first existed in Roman times. Or at least my books place them at that date. Rumors of how they were created abound, most suspecting that dark wizards did it to themselves for a form of immortality. That they are children of summoned shades is no less probable with magic involved. If the door is indeed the veil in the ministry, then the ministry might be aware of what Alia did and are guarding the blasted thing. He nodded. That would explain it nicely, perhaps too nicely. She sighed. But about fixing them, Harry. You possess a unique form of mage sight, this we know. But you can't see the black vampire pattern, and how would you even begin to fix it? What would be your model? He grimaced. Experimentation, a lot of it, too much of it. She grumbled, sighed, and leaned forward to wrap her arms around his shoulders in an awkward embrace. You don't have to, she whispered in his ear. I know you feel like you need to. You probably even want to from a scientific standpoint, but you don't have to. He smiled lopsidedly. I know, but I want to try anyway. He felt her answering smile against his cheek. I knew you'd say that. Onward and upward, then. When will we ever find time alone? He laughed and pulled her up, their arms still tangled together. Who needs sleep, really? You know, the average witch or wizard needs 1 to 2 less hours of sleep than a mundane counterpart once they are past adolescence. She cut off his sentence with a long, lingering kiss. He didn't have much to say after that. The spring meeting of the Wisengamot went about like Harry expected. It began with the same tired debates of the year before. The issue of new cauldron thickness legislation was finally resolved, with Lord Ogden and his coalition of business owners losing their push for less restrictions on the sale of cheaper cast iron materials. A witch brought up her concerns over the state of Diagon Alley, specifically how much dirtier it was now that property owners inside the alley had to pay for their janitorial labor. She was hushed by another witch whose acidic response on the inexpensiveness of slavery made him want to applaud. A wizard sitting 7 seats down from him did, to the consternation of Lady Gamp. She did not like such uncivilized displays. Then there was the tedious hour of debate over the House Elf Committee, who had 20 pages of civil rights laws to put before the council. Harry, and a great deal of others based on their mutterings, wondered why the members didn't just make a copy of basic human rights and be done with it. Instead, there were arguments over how tax law might apply to house elf income, whether a department should be created to deal with disputes between house elves and humans, and if house elves should be allowed to enter into apprenticeships to learn basic medical arts. The last was something Harry had not considered. He knew that Creature was able to use his unique magic to heal to some degree. He had simply never thought a house elf would wish to pursue a career in that field. Which just goes to show that even he still had some unconscious bias still. Lord Malfoy's sharp quip on the matter was audible over the multiple witches and wizards who bickered between themselves during a brief recess that followed. Merlin forbid the house elves actually want to pursue a career. The thought practically makes my knees tremble with fear. The laughter that followed made some colorful souls duck down in their plush green chairs. No one liked to be laughed at. But it was not until after the recess that the werewolf matter arose once more. Non-Mordia is a threat to modern wizarding civilization. Lord Tripe began in his deep sonorous voice. An enclave of dangerous magical creatures that openly oppose this ministry and Wisengamot. They should not be allowed to continue to assemble into a potential army that could kill hundreds of our citizens. Since when is disagreeing with the ministry a crime? Neville demanded in response from across the room. And werewolves are citizens. They are part of the wizarding world. You argue with labels that spread fear and hate instead of confronting the true problem. You are afraid of a world where werewolf children are treated as equals to your own children. With 2 such opening statements, the debate was headed for another heated argument between the 2 opposing forces. But Lord Dumbledore spoke up before it could degenerate beyond control. 2 main issues have been brought to the table. His voice was chiding, a carefully controlled modulation that made one lean forward to catch every word. The old wizard knew how to manage a room. 1. That Non-Mordia has reached a population level of nearly 1,000 individuals, with no civil defense force in place to control crime and establish order. 2. That the warding in place does not prevent a werewolf from willingly leaving the safe zones in the hours before the full moon and transforming near the 2 wizarding settlements in a 100-mile radius. Lord Longbottom and Lord Ogden, as the managers of Non-Mordia, your response to these accusations?" Silence fell, the kind that meant magic was at work. Harry could see the blanket silencing charm ripple across most of the atrium in a sparkle of Dumbledore's magic. The Supreme Mugwump was going to guarantee that Neville, and Neville alone, was allowed to speak. It made for an odd sight for Harry to see most of his world reduced to the pale blue light of Dumbledore's soul. Silencing charms channeled through a wand were usually shades of red, but when Dumbledore cast them, it was only with the brute force of his raw magical power. Astounding. Non-Mordia's wards have been tested and are above Ministry standards. Neville's tone was scathing, anger a low, simmering boil. What shyness the man had had in previous sessions had burned away with the force of that righteous anger and the growing confidence he had in his cause. But any person, at any time, can choose to commit a crime, and a werewolf willingly leaving safety during or before the hours of the full moon is without question a crime. None of us are asking werewolves to be held to a different standard than any witch or wizard is. On the contrary, we are asking for equality. Biting emphasis. Harry smiled, hearing the repetition of Viola James' own wording. His Viola was an inspiration indeed. As such, when a werewolf commits a legitimate crime, they should be punished as any criminal is. In the case of the full moon, that crime is attempted murder even if no one is infected or killed. Harry blinked at that, and wished again he could see the facial expressions of those around him. No doubt, under the silencing charm, there were currently more than a few gasps of surprise. Attempted murder, while accurate, was not the stance many would expect a pro-werewolf champion to take. However, intent must be established as well. Werewolves under the moon have no sentience, no control. They can be taken advantage of. In every case, werewolves should be offered the same rights as every witch and wizard. The right for a trial with representation, where such intent can be determined in all fairness. A deep breath before Neville continued. As for the first issue, the organization of Non-Mordia as a private town on private land with no ministry funding should not be an issue before the Wisengamot. However, as a gesture of good faith, I will make it known here and in the Daily Prophet that Non-Mordia has established its own aura force within the town and will be holding elections to determine who will lead that force. Harry was certain that the election would be won in a landslide, with Ronald Weasley the winner. Most of the werewolves of the town looked upon Neville and Ron as their personal saviors, and Weasley had hinted more than once during their meetings that the wizard wanted to prove that werewolves could work in law enforcement as well as, if not better than, non-lycanthropic wizarding counterparts. The thought brought another smile to Harry's face as he leaned back in his chair, gloved hands folded in his lap to hide the black lines of the stone. It was something to realize that he was not the sole champion of either his or Hermione's two political causes anymore. Malfoy had become the main force in supporting House Elves in the last months, and Neville and his coalition had rising strong support from many different factions. They're going to make it, Harry suddenly thought. It would take time, but the werewolves and House Elves alike were well on the path to equality, and not simply on the brute force of his own reputation, power, and money. The wizarding world was beginning to realize what the Muggle world had started to decades ago. No one group of people was superior to another simply because they wished it was so. After another hour, in which Lord Tripe tried and failed to combat Neville's simple reasoning about Non-Mordia with the fear of potential futures, the meeting was adjourned for another quarter. Non-Mordia was safe for the time being, and strides were being made into changing the hearts and minds of those in power about the true nature of werewolves. It would take that change of heart first to change the current stifling anti-werewolf legislation. It would take the acknowledgement of facts, not fear. It would take time, but with that time, the change was far more likely to be permanent and strong through the coming years. Because eventually, there would be that rogue werewolf who was a serial killer. Eventually, a house elf would commit theft or murder, and when that happened, it would be the strength of the laws that upheld justice, not the whim of a fickle public. Harry returned to a silent, grim old place and entered his laboratory with a satisfied sigh. His bulky robes joined his gloves across the back of one chair, followed quickly by the orange dragonhide boots he kicked off into a corner. Comfortable, he settled into a purple chair and called to the cloak, letting it drift over his form and basking in the sudden dark light that consumed him. A peaceful place in which to think, the silk a soft caress against his face, as he sat and considered human experimentation. It was the wall he kept coming up against, the line drawn into the sand that prevented him from tackling the magical potential he possessed with his unique sight. With experimentation into human patterns, he might be able to cure werewolves and fix vampires. He might learn how to heal and not just duplicate and replace. He might learn how to improve or replicate genetic potential, cure muggle and magical maladies alike. But in the process, he might create monsters. He would learn how to ruin, not just fix. And those he experimented on, no matter how willing, no matter for what good cause, would no doubt experience pain, would eventually die from the process, perhaps more than once. He would hold their lives in his hands. When he experimented on animals, he always justified to himself that there was no permanent damage. He always returned them to their natural state at the end. And with his experimentation on the Horcrux piece of Voldemort's soul, he had justified his actions by affirming that the man was evil, and more self-inflicted damage had already been done to the soul than he intended to do himself. What was wrong with what he needed to do if no one would be permanently hurt by it? If in doing so he might save the lives and improve the lives of potentially an entire species, of thousands of people, magical and muggle alike. It made ethical sense to him, moral sense, common sense. He himself saw no reason to hesitate any more, and with the summer fast upon them, he would have the time he needed. He would start with cadavers. He would learn the human pattern from the outside to the inside. He would learn what made a magical person different from a muggle one, if possible. He would learn and observe and learn some more, because he found nothing so fascinating as learning about the vampires and the veil and how a body might be made to house an immortal soul inside its mortal form. April passed with the speed of a spring thunderstorm. Exam study was a peripheral concern, Hermione putting more emphasis on college than Harry ever spared. Harry considered college an investment in degrees he would need to be taken seriously in future Muggle endeavors. Hermione considered college a test of her worth, her ability and knowledge. While Harry did enough to do well, Hermione did more to be the best of her class, the shining star in all her professors' eyes, and the envy of her classmates, many of whom she found to be as petty as any of the students in her primary school classes. They were just bigger and more nasty with their comments when she ruined the averages in the classes that graded on a curve. Harry listened to her complaints with half a mind to simply show up at one of her classes and transfigure the lot of them into rats. Too bad that would place him in front of the minister with some serious explaining to do. He noticed more about Hermione's habits than he ever did when they lived apart, and he learned all he could about her with more focus than he gave his own college classes. He noticed she always apparated back to Grimmauld Place if she needed to use the bathroom. She had a strong dislike for public restrooms, one rooted more in her past with a troll than in any worry over germs or cleanliness. He observed she liked to sit and talk with Kraken every morning, consuming exactly 1 cup of hot tea before she left for classes. She mentioned at least once a week her desire for a pet, preferably a feline one, though she would settle for a dog. Absolutely nothing scaled, however. She tied her hair back from her face when she studied. She rubbed her face from forehead to neck when she was overtired. She liked to lay on the couch in front of the fireplace to relax, listening to the wizarding wireless. Her light glowed brightest when she was excited, a flickering force of blue-violet power. It beat slowest when she slept, a steady glowing hue that lit the center of his room with her presence. She didn't like her feet covered at night by blanket or cloak, but instead insisted on slipping the cold appendages between his own, which could be quite painful if her ankle bone hit his own. Not that he complained, because her skin was soft against his hands, and her breath warm on his neck. Cold feet were hardly a concern in comparison. He wondered what she had observed about him. He wondered if she found his presence in her life as fascinating as he did her. He wondered if she minded that he liked to sleep under the cloak, or didn't eat lunch, or sometimes lost track of time. He was fascinated with the idea that the love he felt was not simply the emotional response triggered by happy chemicals. He did not just love her because she made him feel good. It was something else, something not so easily defined in scientific terms. Magic did better, describing true love as a compulsion to dedicate oneself to another, to put their wants and needs above yourself. He had read about magical binding ceremonies and the various marriage rituals of wizarding kind, and oddly enough like the traditional pureblood rites the most, where less words were said and more magic was woven, tying two willing souls together in such a way that losing one or the other would wound the very core of a soul. Foolish, maybe, to tie oneself to another so permanently. But Harry couldn't help but want that, not so much as a binding than as a declaration, external proof of what he felt internally. Not that he was anywhere brave enough to ask Hermione for such a thing yet, nor ready for it. But soon, maybe. Soon. Head out of the clouds, Griff. Lestral's smiling voice brought him out of his reverie, along with a soft nudge into his side. They stood together at the edge of an aura perimeter, waiting to be dismissed after a simple raid with Winged Horse. Two business owners had been kidnapped from Diagon Alley and held for ransom for the release of the two Luxumber potioneers the Ministry had captured months before. Instead, two teams of unspeakables had been sent to infiltrate and rescue the wizards, their location gained through the collaboration of the various aura departments. Winged Horse had been held back while Owl did their work, backup in case of a trap. But they hadn't been needed after all. Not for your thoughts. Her voice was male, a fair mimicry of the minister's own tone. Harry smiled at Lestral's antics and shrugged. When would you ask a girl to marry you? She rocked back on her heels. Whoa there. That's a thought worth a galleon at least. Lestral laughed in her current baritone voice. That's serious, huh? Harry looked out over the street at the edge of the Ministry's sparkling emergency anti-apparition ward, watched the wizards moving about, wands alight with spells of one kind or another. Yes, for a while. She hummed a bouncy tune under her breath, then took a deep breath. Well, not like I'm an expert or anything. She began, holding up orange hands with their fluid pattern. But being a girl and all, I'd want a man who married me to have a house or apartment. She held up one finger, ticking them off one by one. And a good job too, kids and stuff. And I'd want him to be nice to his mum, wizards nice to their mums are nice to women in general. Of course, there are exceptions to that rule, like if his mum is a crazy pureblood witch, she laughed at her own joke. And he'd have to like animals, and not mind a mess. And of course, it would help if he's open to exploring his sexuality. Harry sucked in his breath and began to cough with surprise, Lestral thumping him on the back with a large meaty hand as she continued. "'Cause I'm a metamorph magus. I mean, I haven't found a guy like that yet, but a girl can dream right. I've always wanted to try." "Enough," Harry interrupted quickly. "That's enough. Really. Thank you." Her form abruptly began to change, rippling with motion as it began to shrink, becoming more slender and feminine. Her voice this time lacked its laughter and was softer with a young woman's lighter tone. "Seriously, though, I want a guy who likes my family like I do, who likes the same things I do, wants the same things I do. Not agree on everything, but the big things that matter. If I have that, marriage is just an affirmation of what I would already know once I know those things. We're meant to be." Harry smiled, but before he could speak her tone changed once more, abruptly louder. "But you'd be surprised what kind of things a guy asks for when he finds out his date is a metamorph magus. This one guy wanted to know if I could create a third boob." Harry laughed, the seriousness of the moment lost, as she had intended. But he tucked her words away in his mind, nevertheless. The woman was whip-thin, her deep green satin robes tailored to highlight her form. She liked when they admired her as much as they feared her, when they kneeled in her presence to grovel, but their eyes roved over her helplessly, an effect helped by the charms on those same robes, by the potion she used to coat her fingernails and perfume her skin. She had never been powerful magically. She did not have to be to rule her private kingdom with her cunning mind and her soft hands. They would want her even as she killed them for their failure. They would beg for her touch, even as she punished them with magical thorns. And they had failed, and they would be punished in her garden. The branch of her empire in Britain was falling apart, the roots that kept her business strong being dug up piece by piece. Lux Samba was her child, her creation, her lover. It was a living vine made up of the greed and desire of witches and wizards the world over. And it would not die because of the British ministry. She would make certain of that. If a person threatened to destroy what she loved, she would destroy what they loved. If they threatened to hurt what she loved, she would hurt what they loved. If they killed a single stem, she would kill them. So simple. Retaliation was an art she learned long ago and perfected throughout her decades of life. She only needed to know who the thorn in her side was, only needed to know the name of the weed she needed to pull up by the roots and throw into the fire. Lux Samba. Let their light shine onto Britain and reveal the truth of their enemy. They couldn't hide forever. No shadow was deep enough to hide them from her. She did so love to fight with fire. Chapter 29. The Cinnamon Cat. Walking through Diagon was never easy anymore. Disguises had to be made, in practical clothing or with magic, often both supplementing each other, to prevent outright public detection of his presence. The incident with the diamond flowers and the children, which seemed far too long ago by Harry's reckoning, had become something of an alley legend. As such, hopeful children and their equally hopeful parents, along with hordes of witch and wizards, took it upon themselves to keep an eye out for a green-eyed wizard carrying a staff, who might bestow on their lucky souls the same wealth at the asking. He shouldn't have made them out of diamond. Why had he done that? Next time he would pick satin. A nice verdant shade of green. Hermione grasped his hand tightly, her voice an excited whisper. I knew this would work. Not one has recognized us. Harry, feeling slightly ridiculous under the unfamiliar wig, returned her excitement with a faux woman's voice. It was beyond creepy to speak like normal and hear a different voice come out. Oh, my dear sister, you always have the best ideas. Her husky laugh made his smile genuine. It had been a pretty good idea if it prickled his male pride. Dudley would never let him hear the end of it if he found out his cousin had dressed up as a rather unattractive red-headed witch. But no one would see the blind sorcerer when they looked at him in this get-up, that was for certain. He hadn't even brought his staff, though the lack made him feel naked. Hermione had replaced it with a short brown cane, its top carved like a lion's roaring head. Apparently, Creature had dug it out of the black storage. Harry absently touched his face with one hand to scratch at where a wisp of dead fiber had brushed him. Dead hair, even if it was an animal's, felt kind of like wearing a corpse. On his head, stop that, you'll mess up the makeup. She tugged his hand down, then giggled. You'll mess up your makeup. Glad someone is enjoying herself. He grumbled. This woman would rather not wear whatever the hell that black stuff is you slopped on my face. It's sticky. It's not black, it gives you a more tannish look, like you've actually gotten some sun. You don't put that crap on your face, Harry demanded. So why did I? He couldn't pick up the shadowy black liquid makeup with his sight if it was spread thinly enough, nor could he see various lotions for the same reason. The natural light of a body would shine through it, but he still would have noticed if she wore it. It smelled like chemicals. I do sometimes, she said firmly, and you've never noticed. Plus, I don't need it for my disguise. I can just use a glamour without it making me blind. He gaped at her. I would too notice. Oh, look, Harriet, we're here. She pulled them to a stop, and her light practically beamed out of her with excitement. The menagerie. Harry took a stabilizing breath of the alley air. Then he let his very excited girlfriend drag him through the doors. The cat was half Kneazle. He recognized the difference immediately, from the complexity present in the overly large feline pattern to the brighter sparkle of its cinnamon brown hue. It was also old. Its life was the slow, steady beat of an experienced elder, not the wild, pulsing chaos of a young kitten. The beast purred audibly where it sat on the counter, the loud rumble overpowering the sounds of the other animals in their cages, the squawking, squeaking, roaring mess of the magical menagerie. Hermione cooed over a box of Kneazle kittens on the floor by her feet 2 shelves over, while Harry leaned against the counter near the old purring half-Kneazle and tried not to let the writhing brown and blue lives of the hundreds of animals make him dizzy. So much life trapped in one place. How did the proprietor stand the sight, let alone the smell? Even with cleaning charms, the rumbling grew louder. Harry looked to the side, where he could swear the half-Kneazle had shifted closer. It really was much larger than a normal cat. It dwarfed Hiss and Spit by a good 6 inches. The owner of the store fluttered about Hermione, waving long purple arms about as he talked excitedly about whatever creature she paused in front of, which at that moment was the box of kittens. Oh, please, don't let her want more than one. I can't handle more than one. A brush of soft fur. Harry jolted, narrowing his eyes down at the cinnamon cat that was now at his elbow, nonchalantly rumbling its constant purr, face directed out over the shop. The end of its bottle-brush tail twitched. "I'm on to you," Harry muttered, and the half-Kneazle proceeded to ignore him, squat brown face fixed on the owner of the store as he kept up his fluttering. "Guy's pretty ridiculous," Harry commented idly, sight now locked onto the animal. Kneazles were notorious for their intelligence. Smart enough that they made some witches and wizards uncomfortable. It was said some could even understand the conversations of those around them. The cat flicked an ear, its tail jerking in what looked, oddly enough, like a nod of agreement. "Why are you still here?" It slowly turned its face, and no doubt was fixing him with a glaring stare. All he saw was the bright cinnamon light of its face, shaped into a large feline shape. "Oh, don't mind that, sourpuss." Purple rushed forward, arms attempting to shoo the half-Kneazle away. The animal merely turned onto its side, facing the opposite direction with blatant disrespect. He decided he could like cats after all. "He's been here, O'Merlin, since my father ran this shop. Anyone who takes him just brings him back, or he comes back himself. And I have a very strict no-money-back policy on my pets. He must be going on 15 years old now, or more. But no matter. Kneazle kittens can live up to 25 years. A good investment indeed." Behind the purple man, Hermione sniffed loudly. "I don't know if pets should be considered investments." The man whirled and changed his tact with the practiced ease of a salesman. "Oh, my dears, not what I meant at all. At all. I simply understand that people desire to spend many years with their beloved companions." Harry didn't have to guess what Hermione's reaction to the saccharine sweetness in the man's tone would be. She didn't like the wizard any more than he did. "We'll be going now. Thank you for your assistance. Let's go, Harriet." Her own sweetness was as false as the man's. She stepped forward to grip his arm and began to pull him away, her fingers digging angrily into the sleeve of his robe. "The nerve," she grumbled when they exited. "You should have heard some of the utter nonsense he was spouting. How that man even has a license to sell." Harry suddenly stumbled, his foot colliding with a darting brown shape, and would have fallen flat on his face had Hermione not had such a tight grip on him. She sucked in a breath, and Harry heard his doom when she spoke. "Oh, you beauty, what a handsome little guy." The old cat rumbled its loud purr and let itself be gathered into loving blue-violet arms. Harry glared fiercely. He did not like cats. "Crookshanks, you harridan." The rushing purple shopkeeper, green robes rumpled as he chased after them. "I'm so sorry, I'll take him at once." Hermione turned her body away, the half-Kneazle cradled against her breasts in a way that made Harry instantly jealous. He was jealous of a cat. This was a new low. "I've changed my mind. I want this cat," Hermione announced. "Crookshanks, you said. How much?" The man sputtered. "Oh, miss, you don't want old Crookshanks. He's old and spiteful." Harry could have groaned aloud. If he knew one thing, it was that one never told Hermione what she did or did not want. "I want him. And how dare you call this big sweetheart spiteful? Just look at him." Harry was looking all right. The cat sounded smug with its loud purring and twitching fluffy tail. The man sputtered again, but Harry only sighed. Time to accept the inevitable. He wasn't going to accept this. "Oh, hell no. Not in our bed," Harry stated, arms crossed, that night as they prepared for sleep. Spread across the bed like a big fluffy pillow, Crookshanks rolled onto his back, as if inviting a soft hand on his furry belly. Harry already bore 2 teeth imprints in one hand from making the mistake of accepting that invitation the hour before. "Oh, Harry, it's his first night here. He must be so lonely and scared." So saying, Hermione lay down beside the big creature and proceeded to pet the fiend, who absolutely did not bite her. Crookshanks had apparently figured out who was boss around Grimmauld Place, and it wasn't him. Harry sat tentatively on the other side of the creature, the way one might approach a live electrical wire. No response. He began to relax. But when he went to gather Hermione close, the monster let out one low, long growl. Hermione giggled. "He'll get used to you." But she wasn't talking to Harry. She was talking to the bloody cat. "Can't you just accidentally send it outside to get lost in the street?" Harry furtively asked Creature 2 days later when he came down for breakfast. Creature assumes Master is referring to the newest individual living in Grimmauld Place. Harry looked behind him, testing his newest skill to look beyond the kitchen wall and into the hallway, which was blessedly empty. "Yeah, the monster with the brown fur. Creature believes he is a ginger," Creature corrected. Harry waved one hand in dismissal. Yes, Ginger. That thing. A flash of cinnamon brown, and the devil in question was there, jumping up onto the kitchen table with two quick bounds. The devil that growled and spit the moment he tried to kiss his girlfriend. The devil that insisted in laying on her lap at every opportunity. The devil that tried to kick him out of his own bed. Harry glared furiously at the feline, who disdainfully stretched itself across his table with the authority of a master of the house. Whoever named it Crookshanks was spot on. This cat was a crook. Creature turned, yellow hands deftly placing a round purple saucer filled with pale tan liquid in front of the half-kneesel. Harry gaped. Did you just give him milk? Milk! The elf gently ran spindly hands across the feline's back, and that blasted rumble began to echo. This cat was stealing the hearts of his family one by one. Harry stomped out of the room before Creature could respond verbally. Harry stood in his laboratory and played with the colors of magic. He was trying to strip an essence from its pattern, trying to discover just how far he could stretch the laws of magic and physics. He had an uncut violet crystal, a budding jade rose trimming, and a purple glass that held blue water. Each possessed a color and a pattern, an essence and a structure. He had made a dragon structure of stone essence. He knew, with raw magic to fuel the transformation, that essences and structures were interchangeable. But could one exist without the other? The pattern have no essence. He drew the water up and away with magical fingers of emerald green power and tried to strip the faceted liquid pattern away. It was hard to grasp it, hard to take color away from something that was made of such color, but it haltingly slid free the way a knife might slide from a sheath. In one place, pure blue color swirled in the air, cradled in his power. In the other, there was nothing he could see, but he could feel its presence there. He held something he could not see. When he reached out a hand, he touched something that felt wet, a tepid temperature that dripped from one finger. What is water when it is not water at all? His mind couldn't quite comprehend the paradox. No more than it could understand when he stripped the jade from the thorns of the rose, and yet still felt its prick against his questing touch, or when he held a crystal cool to the touch against his face, and yet saw nothing of its once violet essence. The colors, the essences, he held apart with strain. They seemed to be trying to return to their patterns, like a rubber band stretched to its capacity or a magnet striving to reach its opposite force. What would happen if that connection snapped? As if in answer, he felt the crack against his cheek and flinched as the crystal he jerked away suddenly shattered, invisible pieces making no sound when they should have hit the floor. The rose and the water were gone as well, and he hadn't even noticed their disappearance. When he turned for the colors, he saw them fading away. He tried to hold them, but they slipped from his power like water dripping through cracks in a glass. There was nothing of substance to cling to. Harry fell into his chair with a thoughtful grimace. He had hoped that the vampire's black color might be simply the lack of proper human hue, not just a symptom of no soul. After all, dead flesh is white. But if that was true, when he stripped the essence from the objects, they should have turned black, and they hadn't. They had destroyed themselves instead. A dead end, then. Harry's weary sigh was suddenly knocked from him as a large, fluffy shape jumped into his lap, stiff paws barely missing delicate areas. He would have given in to the urge to throw the cat across the room if its aim had been off. The cat was too smart to have done such a thing by accident. He sat stiffly as Crookshanks settled down, hands held up as non-threateningly as possible. Harry waited for the snap, waited for the growl, the bite. When the purring started, he glared. "I'm not giving in that easy," he stated, even as he gently ran one hand tentatively through soft, luxurious cinnamon fur. "I know your true colors." The cat only rumbled its response. Reluctantly, Harry began to relax, his mind turning back to his current conundrum. Goblins were shades of burned orange, house elves of vibrant fluorescent yellow. Those with Vila heritage colored in crimson strands, the merfolk in bluish gray. Each their own individuals, but with non-human characteristics overshadowing whatever unique soul color they might possess. Could vampires be the same? Carbon black simply being the hue of vampiric genetic material. If that was so, then a simple color change from black to white would not be a step forward to fixing them. He couldn't simply make them human by forcible transfiguration. It would be like forcing a cat to become a dog and expecting the animal to be happy with the change. Yet the broken humanity he had seen was, at its root, human, Just like Velar and goblins, who could interbreed with humankind, it was compatible enough to create mixed heritage children. How to fix something he had no template for? There was no textbook to read, no master of this craft to follow, only legends. He absently pet Crookshanks, staring into the cinnamon-brown fur, the feline pattern. How it angled and twisted, how it knotted and looped. Elegance and form, the amazing complexity of it. As if some genius in the ancient past had sat down and decided to create a wondrous creature of light that no mortal man could again recreate, only copy the brilliance of it, creation. He had to create a new pattern, an unbroken one, something he had never done before, had to see how such a thing would work. Harry leaned his head back, tried to envision something new, something the world had never seen. Not an imitation, not a recreation, not a copy. Something that had its roots in normality, but was more than what it was. The cat under his hands purred, the vibration echoing up his arms. He had created a feline pattern years before, using the principles of transfiguration and stone. He had had a formula to follow, tweaked based on his own thoughts and theories. Now he needed no formula. He knew how to recreate and copy a pattern. He could see what made a cat, how the light glowed, how the pattern twisted. There were nuances that were unique, the slight differences between breed and size, sex and strength. But at its core, a cat was a cat, just like a human was a human. So, with Crookshanks under his hands, he called his power to the surface, loops of emerald that circled about his body like neutrons around the nucleus of an atom. He could smell the electric scent of its power, felt the fur raise under his fingers in response. From the air, on the strength of his green magic, he wove a feline pattern, legs and paws, tufted ears, long tail, brown essence. No pulse yet, no life, something new. From memory, he built the blue wings of a large barn owl, strong filaments and feathers, muscularity and the bone beneath. He brought the two pieces together, considered how one might make a ground animal fly. Dragons flew with orange-red fire, phoenixes in scarlet ripples of beautiful light. A hippogriff held within itself the pale blue of an eagle and the rich brown of a horse, melded together with perfect precision. Griffins were the same, beige lion and blue eagle, contradictory ribbons of life and purpose and pattern. It was nothing new, truly, to make a cat fly. He had seen its like on a large scale. He had a rough template to follow. He wove the wings into the cat, blue and brown together into an original tapestry of beautiful perfection, and marveled at how well the pieces fit. Marveled again when he saw how the feline heart strengthened on its own, growing larger, how the tail flared with unintentional feathers, the eyes dilating into a bird's optical shape. The pattern, with his magic as its fuel, his desire as its focus, became whole. Eyes narrowed, he let the complete animal gently fall to the floor, still unmoving, its heart not yet beating. A domesticated cat and owl hybrid, the first of its species. Crookshanks, tail lashed against his calf, the cat silent now as it glared at the lump on the floor. Harry laughed, exuberance fighting to rise into exultation. But not yet. He wanted more. Needed to prove this was not just creating a miniature griffin. Alone in his laboratory, with only Crookshanks as quiet observer, he began to weave light again, shades of blue and brown and orange. Brown for a mammal with fur and claws and teeth. The pale blue of a bird in flight, the darker blue of a fish underwater, the muddy mix of slithering orange reptile. A snake's head and fangs, its belly scaled like a fish, its mammalian back paws large and webbed, its wingtips large primary feathers, the arch's solid furred skin. Its neck long, its three tails doubly so. A reptile's ridges along its spine, flexing against its back. A crest that formed on its head and neck, proud as any phoenix's. It was a conglomeration of what he considered beautiful in the species he had encountered. It formed together a tapestry of animal life. A creature not bound to air or water or earth, but capable of living in each. A fish's gills with a bird's wings and a snake's mind and a dog's paws. It was marvelous. But something in it reminded him of a dementor, how the many colors wove and sank into each other. When it was complete, he lay it beside the cat-owl and compared how the two's designs could exist whole and unbroken with Crookshank's own feline pattern. How is such a thing possible? And if he could do this to an animal, if he could put wings on a cat and gills on a dog, if he could weave magical red fire into a snake's soul and purple stone upon its scales, What could he do to humankind? Was there an end to the possibilities? Already temporary changes were capable with potions and plants and spells. He could make those changes permanent. He could give a man the ability to breathe under water with Merkant, could give a woman wings like a Vela. Couldn't he? The desire to know, to try, burned inside him with a fire of its own. And with that desire came another question. Had someone already done so? Had someone long ago taken a human and made them inhuman? Were merpeople and Vela, sphinxes and centaurs, all just species that had been created more successfully than vampire kind? Were griffins and hippogriffs, the many different horse breeds, bicorns and chimeras, the thousands of magical creatures, all also the descendants of just such creations? Because he couldn't be the first with his abilities. Statistically, there had to be others. Others who had discovered what he had, that one could play with life, could twist and mold and reform it. The mutations of werewolves could be a failed genetic experiment, just as vampires seem to be. So could dementors with their humanoid shapes and their endless hunger for souls and emotions. How much of magical myth could be explained by methodical scientific experimentation? How many legends had their root in some mad genius of a witch or wizard who made the world their personal sandbox? The questions that arose with such a hypothesis were complex, the implications staggering. What it might mean for the magical world, what it might mean for the mundane one. Because if he could create a magical creature, then he could create a magical human. If he could isolate the factor that made wizarding bodies able to channel and hold a magical spark, then he could recreate it. He could. He could. He couldn't even grasp it alone. The consequences, the political, the economic repercussions, would change the world, would break the status quo, shatter it into a million fragments. Harry bent over and breathed deeply, cradling the stiffening cat in his arms as Crookshanks let out a meow of protest at the motion. He didn't let go. He needed to hold on to something. His and Hermione's dream of one day building a united world where magical and mundane citizens lived in peace. They had known it would take decades, even centuries, to fulfill that dream, to create any semblance of peace. He had only just begun to consider how to create magical factories, how to employ teams of trained Muggle-borns into creating magical items that would be useful and masked in the mundane world. But what if there was no mundane world any longer? What if a new generation arose where all were magical, all capable of channeling energy to some degree? I'm home. Crookshanks shot from his arms at the words, even as Harry jumped at the crack of apparition from down the hall. Then he looked down at his empty green hands, the stone a black-white geometrical stain on one palm. All of these thoughts, spurred because of broken black vampires and a brown half-Kneasel, all the potential futures he couldn't yet fathom. Harry, her voice from his doorway, her light shining out with magical brilliance. Brilliance he might one day be able to give to non-magical people. What's wrong? Her hand on his cheek, warm and solid. He turned his head to place a soft kiss on her palm. Nothing. He whispered into blue-violet light, "Sit down with me." And he spoke and watched as her light began to burn ever brighter with the fever of possibilities. Hermione sat on their bed, watching as Harry slept, tousled black hair a mess over the silver silk of his invisibility cloak. He was exhausted. It was easy to see in his hooded eyes, in the stress lines forming across his forehead. He didn't sleep enough, or eat enough, or relax enough. She was just as guilty, consumed in her own studies and research. But she still hadn't seen until that moment how tired he looked. She adjusted the silver cloak further down, her hands absently running across the skin of his back where he lay sprawled on his stomach. Crookshanks had taken up residence across his feet, the large ginger cat's yellow eyes cracked open to observe her movements, the end of his tail twitching with wakefulness. She should be sleeping. Should be cuddled under the silk and sharing warmth and comfort. After the discussion they had had, one that had lasted until late into the night, she ought to rest her eyes and her mind. He was considering human experimentation on a genetic level, changing the very fabric of what made a person a person. Or was it what made a body a body? What were the ethical consequences of such a thing? She tried to imagine giving her parents the ability to use a wand, to ride a broom. Tried to imagine the mundane professions that would become nearly irrelevant overnight, dentists being among them. Should they try something just to prove they could? And if they could in fact do what Harry suspected, should they? Would they even be obligated to improve the lives of so many if they could? It was the kind of question she couldn't answer right away. They had both agreed on only one thing, that they would wait to consider further action in full until they knew it was in fact an option at all. If Harry could fix the vampire's pattern, if he could fix what Alia, or one like her, had done centuries before, maybe then they could consider how this new potential would change their plans. Hermione lay back onto her side, curling around Harry's still form, trying to quiet her mind. Crookshanks rose and padded over, settling into the slim space between them with a feline sigh of contentment. She smiled and let herself begin to drift into sleep. The minister met him at the leaky cauldron, their booth cloaked under several layers of privacy wards. Outside that ward, Vaughn stood side by side with an aura guard who gleamed a vibrant orange. "I'm surprised you wanted to meet here," Harry commented as they sat. "Usually you are chained to your desk." Scrimgeour grumbled his answer. "Believe it or not, politicians do occasionally desire to get away from politics." Harry raised a brow. "I don't believe it." The older wizard grunted. "Speak for yourself too then, Lord Potter, as we are here at your request." Harry frowned. "Fair enough." The minister leaned back in his padded booth, the ancient cushion creaking with the movement. "So, what crisis does the blind sorcerer wish to spearhead next? Goblin rebellion, perhaps? The Daily Prophet was thrilled to report your brief employment months back." It was Harry's turn to grumble. "I wish they would stop reporting every move I make like it's a matter for national security. I don't even know how that information leaked." "Ah!" The wizard tapped on hand against the table. "The curse of the celebrity. Eyes on you wherever you go, whatever you do. Stop meddling in current affairs and the fascination might fade." Harry laughed. "I'm sure that would thrill you, Minister, to not see my face in the Wisengamot. What would please me currently is to know what you want." A thread of steel in his voice. "Not everyone who tracks your movements reports to the Daily Prophet." "Is that a hint that the Ministry is keeping tabs on me?" he queried. The wizard only tilted his face down, Chartreuse' fingers tapping their staccato beat. Harry let that silence grow a moment, then decided to approach the matter directly. "I want access to the Veil. I've waited nearly 5 months. The werewolf crisis is no longer a crisis. Public sentiment has shifted into their corner, and people aren't avoiding the shopping alleys anymore. You have no reason to deny me this request in light of my cooperation with the Ministry." The man's heart beat harder, the yellow-green pulse rising with some emotion. "Level 9 is restricted for a reason. It contains secrets of magic that are not safe for the public to know or experiment with. The Department of Mysteries was put into place to not only research dangerous concepts and artifacts, but to also protect people from them." "Concepts like death?" Harry asked quietly. "I'm not the public, Minister, and I'm not irresponsible. I, of anyone, understand that some facts should be kept secret." The silence grew again, a pause where he knew the wizard would be considering the many hints and half-truths that had drifted between the two of them since the first time they stood over the torn body of a Dementor. "The Veil is dangerous," the minister said softly. "Just being around it, looking at it, can be fatal." In the past, teams of 3 were always sent to perform any tests together, with one facing away from the Veil at all times due to its mesmerizing effect. The current director hasn't authorized any new research into the Veil in the last decade due to the rate of unintentional casualties such research causes. We still, even after years of study, know very little about what it is or how it was created, nor who built the room it resides in. I cannot imagine what it is you think to do by studying it that countless others have not tried and failed at already. I'm assuming this room is made of rock stone." Harry inquired, thinking of the cave in the vampiric legend, and saw the wizard's unintentional jolt of surprise. Then the wizard cursed. "That's why you have been seen at the Krupp, the bloody vampires." Harry sat up straighter. "So the Ministry does no more than is in public textbooks on the living dead. You are aware of their legend, and how it might relate to the Veil." The man waved a hand, voice aggrieved. "It's been a fascination of Level 9 for decades, but no proof has ever been gathered to substantiate a connection between the Veil and their door. No spell or ritual known has worked to truly summon the dead outside of myth, and any attempt to destroy the Veil by my predecessors failed. Even fiendfire, capable of melting stone, leaves the archway and its surroundings untouched." It's an object of purely magical construction, given a physical form as an afterthought, and anyone who tries to physically touch it dies, simple as that. A pause, a flash of anger. And vampires, Lord Potter, are the werewolves no longer exciting enough for you? Harry's chin rose at the accusation. The werewolves are building a new world for themselves, minister, with or without witches and wizards. Their situation in no way resembles that of the vampires. Fingers balled into a fist, their tapping silenced. The vampires have rights. The ministry does not hunt them and does not prevent them from accessing blood ethically. We allow them their barns, their covens, and their lands. What more could they possibly want? And from you, why must you always meddle with the world? Harry made himself react calmly, considering the question in the spirit it was asked, from a man he respected even if he did not always agree with him. Are treated as less than human in public perception and by ministry employees. They simply want to be human, the minister interrupted. But they're not. They are not. If the public really knew what they were capable of, the creatures would have been exterminated decades ago. We hide the extent of their abilities to save them. Harry laughed at that, hating the bitter edge in his words even as he heard it. You don't really believe that. The ministry tried to kill them off already, didn't they? And failed. The vampires have money, lots of it. With money comes power, influence. Doubtless many of their connections are within the Wisengamot itself. And one vampire alone would decimate a team of wizards with both hands tied behind its back. But we both know that vampires rarely travel alone. Vampires still exist because the ministry can't kill them outright. You've been forced to accept their presence, and you cover up your own weakness by hiding the strength of your opponents. What do you want from me? A cold question. Admit that the ministry is flawed, has problems, weaknesses. Show me a government that does not. Admit that vampires could kill us all while we slept. Fine, I'll admit it. Treat vampires like they are not what they are, soulless, blood-sucking cadavers. I won't, because they are. Let me study the veil. Harry met cold words with his own. Maybe you'll get lucky and I'll touch it. The minister scoffed. Those words show that you are still a child. I'm trying to protect you, damn it. If I wanted you out of my hair, I wouldn't be sitting here having this argument. Then stop protecting me, Harry demanded, and trust that I know what I'm doing. The wizard sucked in a breath and growled it back out again. Don't insist on this thing. Pick another pet project. Start that goblin rebellion, I'll deal with it, but don't go meddling with your own mortality. Don't start down that path. Harry blinked at the sudden switch from anger to worried concern. I didn't say I was. Why else? The minister sounded weary now. Who studies death, Potter? Wizards afraid of dying. The darkest magic, the most forbidden, all deal with death and the quest for immortality. Vampires themselves are probably one such failed quest, and studying such things taints a person in ways they can never recover from. It rots away at the magic and the sanity. It shatters the soul. Mortals are not meant for immortality. I know, Harry said simply, and absently rubbed the palm of his right hand. I know that better than many people. I promise you, I have no intention of seeking immortality. I just, how to explain what he wanted, and not give away too many closely held secrets. I need to understand. I need to see it. A long sigh from the older wizard as the man shifted in his booth, magic pulsing with agitation. You think you can just look at the veil and understand anything. You talk of sight like you can actually see. You try to touch the veil and it will claim you as it has countless others. You step too close and it will whisper to you in the voices of everyone you have ever loved and lost. It is an object of death that brings only death. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You seem familiar with the vampire legend. Says the door was never meant to have a physical existence that one could touch, never meant to exist in the first place. The Department of Mysteries agreed with that assessment long before I was born, which was why they attempted to destroy the veil, before some descendant could try to use the veil for a darker purpose than suicide. Harry could respect that the minister had dropped the pretense of ignorance when it came to the vampires and their mythology. He spoke carefully, knowing he stood on shaky ground. Necromancy, that's what you are building up to, summoning an undead army. That's why the ministry was built here, and why it stayed here when the Muggle city grew up around them. The veil, not just the veil. Scrimgeour interrupted. The death chamber itself holds mass quantities of power, the kind that draws all sorts of attention. It's why our unspeakables take oaths of loyalty and silence, the sort that punish any oathbreaker with permanent silence. It's why the ministry has always been cloaked in layered wards before they were even necessary for security. To mask the draw of the chamber, this is the place you want me to let you waltz into, the heart of magical Britain and its greatest vulnerability. Why should I let you go there? Harry leaned back with a grimace and considered the few cards he held, what bargaining power he possessed. Scrimgeour was not a minister who could be bribed in this instance, with money or with favors. He had to have a good reason, one based on facts that the man could accept. And the minister had told him things in the last minutes that Harry knew was a risk in itself. He could have simply said no, and not explained why. He had trusted Harry with more knowledge of the veil and the chamber than he could possibly have possessed before. But how much did Harry trust him in return? How much was he willing to risk? What if I try to destroy it? The veil. The wizard's chartreuse magic gave away the emotion he was feeling in rapid bursts of light, even as the man spoke with eerie calmness. The last wizard to enter the chamber with the explicit intent to destroy the veil never left that stone room. Instead, his colleagues watched in horror as he walked into the arch with a brighter smile on his face than many had ever seen him possess in life. You can't fight an inevitable state of being. Death is not an enemy any mortal can destroy. You talk like death is a sentient being, a reaper going around with his scythe to cut loose the strands of mortal lives. Who can prove it isn't? The minister responded to Harry's remark. No one. And if you die in this foolish pursuit, I will feel the weight of your life on my own shoulders, because I had the ability to tell you no. Harry's head jerked. You will let me on level 9 then. Scrimgeour dragged a weary hand of light across his face. Merlin, help me. You will have an unspeakable escort at all times, and access to the death chamber alone, no exceptions. There will be a time limit, and no one goes with you. Not your bodyguards, not Miss Granger. These are my conditions. Harry sat up straight, magic swirling with triumph. When can I go? The wizard snorted. I suppose tomorrow is as good a day to die as any. Be there at closing hours, use my direct flu, I will give you temporary access. The less curious eyes, the better. Thank you. Harry responded quickly. I mean it. The minister slid free from the table, standing with regal movements. Thank me by not getting yourself killed. Britain loves you, Lord Potter, as capricious as that is at times. If you die inside my ministry, the speculation will chase me from office and into early retirement. Harry's smile was broad and genuine. If I don't get myself killed, you have my vote next election. He could hear the answering smile in the other wizard's voice as they parted. Favors and bribes, Lord Potter. You're quite the politician yourself. Dudley Dursley shared a small flat with 3 other members of his college boxing team, the space reeking of Chinese takeout and women's perfume. Had a late night last night. His cousin announced offhandedly, before shoving a mix of green cardboard and shadows from one couch cushion. This seat's clean. Harry sat carefully, conscious of the fact that the legs underneath said cushion had a pattern splintered in more than one place. Thanks. Dudley's heavy steps sauntered away, and then back, each beefy hand grasping more shadow. Here, it's plain water. Harry held his hands out, letting the other boy aim and toss the plastic across with practiced ease in a game they had perfected when they were boys. Aunt Petunia had squealed every time her delicate glassware might fly across open air towards her blind nephew, and the sound had always been worth the inevitable lecture. So what's up? You haven't been here since I moved in. Dudley fell onto a chair, the furniture protesting loudly at the treatment. Harry frowned down at the cold bottle in his hand, arranging the thoughts that had spiraled ever since his talk with the minister that morning. And they were alone. No other soul colors present in this room or the bedrooms beyond. Am I too young to ask Hermione to marry me? Dudley, who had just taken a drink, sputtered. What? Wait. The man sat up, bottle placed aside, and scooted his chair closer across the carpet. Ask me that again. Used to his cousin's flair for the dramatic, he repeated himself. Am I too young to ask Hermione to marry me? Dudley snorted. You guys are already living together. What you want to get married for? Harry's frown deepened. Don't answer a question with a question. Dudley's light abruptly stuttered and flashed. Oh my God, she's pregnant, ain't she? Oh my God. His cousin's exuberant groan sounded like that of a dinosaur. Now just wait a moment. Harry quickly tried to interrupt, but Dudley was on a roll. Mum is going to flip, totally flip. I can hear her already. What will the neighbors think? Dudley, Harry snapped. She's not pregnant. Oh, Dudley sounded a little disappointed. Probably a good thing. Her dad would put out a hit on you if you knocked up his daughter before you married her. Thanks, Harry grumbled. I know how to prevent pregnancy, by the way. I'm not irresponsible. Dudley snorted a laugh. You're telling me. So responsible I had to give you a book so you'd know how to get a girl pregnant. Oh, stop it already. His cousin was never going to let him live that one down. I'm serious. Dudley sighed. Yeah, I figured. But marriage, really marriage, now. Both our parents got married in their early 20s. Harry pointed out. It's not that uncommon. But why? Dudley persisted. You live with her. You, I assume, share bills and stuff. Why is there any rush to make it official? Technically, they didn't share bills. Any expenses to upkeep Grimmauld Place were taken from the family vault automatically, as it had been for decades, and Creature had his own line of credit for buying food and supplies from the same. But while they might not share monetary expenses, they did share everything else. They shared a bedroom, a closet, a laboratory, a library. They shared an owl and now a half-Kneasel. They shared each other's space, and he wanted to keep sharing. I suppose it just feels right. The right thing to do, Harry began slowly. A commitment that I can offer, a statement that I'm serious, that I want her to be it for me. His cousin let out a deep breath. Wow, that's big. Sounds like you don't need me to tell you you're ready. Harry grimaced. What will everyone think? Dudley laughed. Mum will be beyond thrilled, but be prepared for her to ask if Hermione's pregnant too, in a very subtle way, of course. He paused to laugh again, shaking his head. Dad's dad, you know. You know better about her parents than me. Good luck asking her father for his blessing, though. That man is scary. Harry jerked, fingers tightening around the plastic. People still do that. It's not just in the movies. He shrugged. Sure, a mate of mine did. More of a respect thing than actual permission these days, of course. Still, couldn't hurt. The sound of the door being unlocked halted further questions, a large burgundy man tumbling into the room in a cacophony of sound and movement. Dursley. Get your stuff, hooray you. Dudley sprang to his feet. My brother, Harry Potter. Harry, this lug is Greg Kelly. He introduced before reaching down to seize a duffel bag. Sorry, Harry, I got to move. Practice in half an hour. But I'll catch up to you soon, see what advice I can come up with when it comes to, asking. Harry nodded and set down the unopened bottle and accepted the quick hug with a smile as he stood. Thanks. I'll see you at Aunt Petunia's in a week. He exited with them, returned a wave, and ignored Greg Kelly's whispered question asking if that was the cousin who was blind. Harry simply started walking, Vaughn falling in beside him without a word from where he had been leaning against the brick building that housed several college flats. The air felt humid, the smell underneath the typical city plethora that of coming rain. Across the Muggle Street, he saw the vampires, moving humanoid shadows that tracked their movements. Spies or guards or both, given that they had made no move to close the distance between them. How the creatures had tracked him across Muggle London was a mystery, given Vaughn had apparated them into an alley closer to Dudley's college. He didn't know enough about vampires yet. He would need to learn. But first, the veil. And after the veil, he would rather like to begin his hunt for a ring. I don't see the point in not letting me go down with you. Hermione grumbled from beside him the next day, where he stood by the fireplace. They've got to know I can just view the memory later. Harry absently fiddled with the sparkling white powder in his hand, eyeing the crackling red firelight. It's more of a safety issue than a privacy one, I believe. She tossed her violet hair and kicked one brown boot gently against his own orange dragonhide. If you don't come back, I promise to break in down there and rescue you from their evil clutches. Because I doubt the veil can seduce you, knowing what we know about reincarnation and death. You and what army? Harry grinned. The house elves, obviously, and I bet Viola could even call some werewolves to her valiant cause. We'll just pop in and tear the place apart. Harry wrapped one arm about her shoulder and leaned down to kiss her neck. My courageous Viola, conquering the world one ministry at a time. I'll be honored to be your damsel in distress. Her laughter spurred his own, and he smiled as she tugged on a lock of his hair. You make a great damsel with your hair getting long again. I'll just dub you Blind Harriet in my call to action. You'll be so thankful when I come to rescue you that you'll swoon at my feet. Harry leered down at her boots. I think I feel a swoon coming on already. She shoved him lightly towards the fireplace, a smile in her voice. Get on with you, Harriet. Go get in trouble. Happy to oblige, my lady. He dipped into a mockery of a curtsy and was rewarded by her buoyant laughter, and he smiled as he tossed the sparkling powder into the fireplace, the red flames growing to a white roar. "Be careful." Harry heard her whisper at his back as he spoke the code word for the minister's personal flu. "I love you," he replied just as softly, and stepped into the bright light. A wizard with a deep maroon soul waited beside the minister's yellow-green form when he stepped from the flames. "This is your escort," Scrimgeour said, and at Harry's nod continued. "You have 1 hour. That's it. In and out. No touching anything. Observational spells only at this time. If you think you have a bright idea to destroy the cursed thing, you run it by the head of the department first so she can calculate any potential collateral damage." "I understand," Harry said simply, and when the maroon person moved to the exit, Harry fell into step behind them, his staff a comforting weight in his hand. Behind him, he saw the minister sit heavily into a chair, Chartreuse' hands running through hair of the same shade. The wizard was worried. For him, or for what he might do. Maroon was stoic as they punched in the button for level 9. Harry couldn't tell if they were male or female, any defining physical characteristics hidden under robes that gleamed with red and gold power. The person didn't introduce themselves either, and Harry settled into the grim silence, feeling for all the world like a very unwelcome guest. When the doors opened again, a circular purple room waited, its stones a shade of violet that reminded him of the heavy granite gravestones in a cemetery. Multiple green doors shone from all directions, veins of power running through them with streams of golden wards and red charms. "The death chamber." Maroon spoke in a feminine voice, perhaps salving his previous thought. Or was she a he, simply using the same charms he had used in Diagon Alley weeks before? Abruptly, the floor underneath him trembled as the walls began to rotate, shaking him from his thoughts. Or was the floor moving? It was hard to tell for certain, but it was an odd security measure regardless. The movement stopped, and Maroon strode forward to the door straight ahead of them, identical to all the others. It opened at a wand wave from the witch in front of him, and Harry suddenly felt a shudder rock him back on his heels. He couldn't say the source. He didn't believe in premonitions, but what he felt a lot like dread. "It's this way. Unless you've changed your mind, sorcerer." The words were razor-sharp, and he wondered if she meant it as a challenge or an insult. "Right," Harry muttered. "Ladies first." The unspeakable snorted and stepped through, waving a hand with a dramatic flair. "Feast your eyes on the death chamber. Try not to die." Harry slowly stepped forward, that feeling of dread growing inside of him. No longer just dread, either, but excitement, a flood of energy rising from his heart that he felt in every particle of his body. And as his foot moved from violet stone to a deeper eggplant shade, the darkest purple hue he had yet observed, he saw what rested regally in the center of the cavernous arena below. And his right hand burned, shooting fire up his arm as he dropped his staff with the shock of the sudden pain, his left grasping the gloved skin in helpless reaction. The cloak upon his shoulders rustled closer, its pattern a mantle against his neck, smooth and soft, and as comforting as the stone in his hand was threatening. It gleamed malevolently, a tattered fall of substance, between the purple arches that were more of a frame than an anchor. Steps led down towards it, as it stood in the bottom of the bowl like a testament to all that was impossible in his world. A waterfall of black darkness and bright stars, pure and deep and impossible. The infamous color of the hallows that he wore on his person that very moment. Only one key difference to set it apart. Where the cloak was mostly cones, and the stone mostly prism, their patterns had a cohesiveness to them, like brothers who shared the same ears or eyes as their parents. A resemblance to the process that had created them and made them a set. The veil's pattern was cone, and prism, and pyramid, and it was broken, fractured in every part of its substance. Shining from those cracks, a rainbow of light poured forth, every beautiful and pure color he had ever seen and more, colors that should have mixed into the dirty brown of a dementor, but didn't, somehow setting themselves apart when he focused too long upon one. The veil rustled in a movement mirrored by the cloak upon his shoulder, echoed by a starburst of pain from his hand. He looked down to see the black-white of the stone sinking deeper into his bones and muscle, latching onto him for all the world like a child grasping the hand of its mother too tightly when it was afraid. Whispers reached his ears, too soft for him to make out, but familiar. So familiar he knew he had heard them before, could swear he knew. He took 2 strides forward to stand at the top of the hill, looking down at the twisting pattern, trying to understand what he saw. The veil was not just broken, it was missing slivered pieces of itself, strips torn loose like threads from an ancient carpet. Prisms and cones and pyramids, their angles fractured in the wrong places, making more shapes that shouldn't be a part of it. Harry, his back to the maroon unspeakable, held his right hand in front of him and pulled the tight glove off with a sharp motion. He looked between the two and compared, even as he commanded the cloak to spill off his shoulders and pool over his left arm, until he held both outstretched, like the conductor of an orchestra of one. 2 hallows and the veil, and he couldn't turn away from the conclusion he felt growing with greater conviction in every moment that passed. More whispers reaching his ears, but they were not as seductive or peaceful as he had expected. They begged in low moans and gasped with angry breaths. They made the hairs on his neck stand up, the emerald of his skin becoming less distinct as his power rose to ripple through the air around him, a winding green snake of magic that sought restlessly for an enemy it couldn't locate. The veil was not a hallow. It was the base material that had fathered them. Chapter 30. Yellow Petals in Golden Firelight. Harry's hands fell down to his sides as he stood in the deep purple room. The cloak he had held didn't fall to the floor. It wound up his side to loop around his neck, warm silk against his skin. Harry clenched his right hand around the hard stone, gritting his teeth as it did its best to burn through his flesh. "Stop it," Harry scolded, his voice too loud in the large stone room, echoing back to him in chiding waves. "Stop it, stop it, stop." And the veil blew out towards him in a wave of sudden color, green and blue and red and purple and brown and gray and orange and yellow, all of them whispering and gasping and moaning and growling. And Harry held his hands up again in helpless reaction to the onslaught, trying to block the incredible sound and color of death as it reached for him with happy, angry fingers. Silk against his arms, black, white, and familiar, covering the emerald of his skin, spreading its pattern out rapidly like the springing release of tension in coiled metal, until it covered his face, and he could breathe again, could hear his harsh pants into the dark light, could hear the startled shout of the unspeakable. "Lord Potter, Lord!" Too late to step aside as he heard her rapid steps, the witch ran full tilt into what must have been an invisible wall to her. They tumbled together down onto the stairs, Harry pushing her off and away from underneath the cloak, whose fabric she grasped in reflex as she fell, tugging it free as she landed flat on her back by the bottom of the eggplant arches and the veil framed between them. Harry sat up on the hard stone, ignoring the bruises that were stinging from his impact on the stone steps. He looked frantically for the cloak and saw its unmistakable pattern held in maroon hands. And a maroon face that looked up into the color streaming from the veil, the witch perfectly still with the terrible quiet of prey attempting to hide from a predator. She was close, so close that the slightest billow might send black-white fabric out to caress her face and beckon her through the cracks and into a rainbow of light. He didn't have his staff, but he didn't care much for subtlety at the moment. Harry reached out for the cloak, stretching the mental muscle that connected his own pattern to that of the hallow, and attempting something he hadn't yet tried. But there was no time like the present for experimental magic. Around the hands that still held onto the cloak tightly, fabric of stars and shadows shifted and grasped, folds upon folds of fabric so similar to the larger pattern hung above it. The unspeakable leaned forward the barest inch, mouth open in silent exhalation, and Harry felt the stone began to burn again. With a wild pull, Harry called for the cloak to return to him, and it flooded away, dragging with it the hands of the maroon soul that twisted and cried out with emotion, legs kicking from underneath her red and gold robes. "No, I need to. I need." The veil flared again as it had before, the maelstrom of color making Harry turn away as the cloak reached him, releasing the witch to wrap about his shoulders. He grabbed the fallen unspeakable and began to drag, then half carry, the now silent woman towards the still open door to the chamber. At his back, the veil whispered its sorrowful anger, until he summoned his staff and shut the door behind them with a satisfied slam. The witch leaned against the violet wall, breathing deep and steady in a rhythm he recognized from those in meditation. The wild flicking of her maroon soul seemed to be steadying out in response. Meditation sounded like a great idea. He might do that himself once he got home to his laboratory, preferably under the cloak and with Hermione beside him, and both of them naked. That would be perfect. That shouldn't have happened. The unspeakable began, bringing him out of his happy thoughts. I've trained myself to resist its pull, but I've never been so close. We shouldn't have gotten that close. Her tone hardened, and he knew who she blamed for that little fact. What did you think you were going to do? Toss on your little invisibility cloak and use magic without me watching? You could have killed us both. Harry glared at the maroon orbs of her narrowed eyes, a detail he could make out from the close vicinity they were in. That wasn't my intention at all. I was testing a theory. More like hiding, but she didn't have to know that. He was beginning to get a bit embarrassed at his reaction, now that the hideous, beautiful thing was in another room. And you were about to jump right into the death trap if I hadn't have pulled you away, so a small thank you would be nice. It's your fault my judgment was compromised, she shot back. By proximity. Well, you shouldn't have run into me. Well, you shouldn't have done your little experiment without warning me. I'm here to keep you from doing something stupid. Well, Harry paused, trying to think of a valid argument to that one. Fine, I should have warned you, sorry. He said the last reluctantly, but it wasn't stupid. She folded her arms and straightened, feet planted firmly now. It was stupid. You can't do something unexpected in a high-risk environment like that. She waved a hand towards the closed door. Every variable must be controlled. He dipped his head in acknowledgement. Understood what she meant, but he couldn't exactly say that putting on the cloak was the cloak's idea, not his own. The explanations required would only lead to difficult questions. He had enough of those to answer already. Maybe next time he would control those variables by just sticking the feet of whatever guard dog was put on him to the floor. I know. Harry tightened his grip on the staff in his hand, the smooth wood a solid comfort. I wasn't expecting the ferocity of the veil's effect on me. It is quite a force. A snort as the unspeakable moved toward the lifts. It's the physical manifestation of the concept of death. Is there any force more powerful? Harry figured that was a rhetorical question, and only followed the angry woman in silence as she punched the button inside the metal walls of the lift. One of her feet tapped an agitated staccato on the floor, one maroon hand fiddling with the wand holster at her hip. I haven't seen that extreme of a reaction before. Her voice was tightly controlled as she broke the sizzling silence. The veil always appears to rustle with an invisible wind, and it always whispers to us, always. But I've never seen it billow that way, nor raise its voice. It was adamant about something, about you. The minute you walked inside, I noticed it, about the instant you dropped your cane like a green teenager. Staff, Harry muttered in response. You're observant. It's my job. She stabbed one finger in his direction. And I've been observing the veil for over half of my life, longer than you've walked the earth. I can guarantee you have our interest now, Lord Potter. The veil doesn't like you. Harry narrowed his eyes. How do you know it doesn't like me too much? You don't yell at someone you like. She returned sharply. You do when you need them to do something. Harry bit back, aggravated with the attitude she continued to display. Or if you or they are in danger. It tried to kill you. Her voice, sickly sweet with polite superiority. It reminded him of a teacher he had disliked greatly at the London school. The dislike had been mutual. And however it might feel, its interest alone is enough to make one wonder just why the sight of you makes death so anxious. A shiver of dread flowed down Harry's spine at those words. I don't know how to destroy it, if that's what you are implying. Not yet. A pity. She shrugged. But that's not what I meant. I don't really think the veil can be destroyed. No, what I wonder is what makes you different from the rest of us. The blind sorcerer, the boy who lived. She bit out the three words like they were a curse. The Department of Mysteries has been interested in your phenomenon for some time. What quality does it take to make an ordinary wizard extraordinary? He refused to shift under the scrutiny he could feel on his skin like the skittering of minuscule bugs. He was not, and never would be, a thing for the ministry to study. When you think you've got it figured out, let me know. Cold politeness in his tone, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. You're so certain you're smarter than us. Low, angry words. The lift dinged as it came to a stop, and Harry moved forward before the doors even began to open. We're watching you. Maroon light flickering with emotion at his back. You'll be a lot easier to solve than what's inside that chamber. He made no comment as he walked towards the minister's office. He didn't fear the Department of Mysteries or their eyes. "Thank you for letting me see it," Harry said as he stood by the ornate green and purple fireplace. It was a revelation. The minister weaved his hands together, growling voice somber. "I didn't really believe you only wanted to get a look at it, but you were gone less than an hour. Less than half an hour. Did it scare you?" "I'm sure you'll receive a full report from the guard dog you set on me." Harry heard the scorn in his own voice and hated what it gave away. "Unspeakables don't like being told no any more than you do," was the minister's reply, "and they've been told to stay out of your business." Harry blinked in surprise. "Why is that?" A casual wave of one yellow-green hand. "I'm still minister here, and I have a soft spot for those who work in law enforcement, no matter what capacity that is in. While I have a say-so, they will leave you alone, while on ministry time and resources at least." "Another favor," Harry smiled. "I almost think we're becoming friends." Scrimgeour waved him away. "Go home, Lord Potter." With another grin, Harry followed his minister's order. The three brothers could have gained access to the chamber in their research. The veil could be the entity Death in the children's story. Hermione slowly mused, looking down at the notes he had quickly written after viewing Harry's memory of level 9. "It's impossible to be certain, but we can theorize they used some process to strip the three main elements of the Hallow pattern into three separate items. It's entirely possible that the shape and ability of those items was completely involuntary, especially if the Hallows and the Veil are semi-sentient. Still, this only raises more questions than it answers." Harry nodded slowly, sitting sprawled across one metal chair, legs stretched out in front of him as he idly watched the dragon essence of his boots burn with mesmerizing orange light. "Unless we come upon some miraculously preserved notes or a sequestered ancient ghost, we'll never know," Harry agreed. "But something about that chamber rattled me. The colors, the sound, everything seemed designed to overwhelm the senses, and the stone didn't like what the veil was trying to communicate." Hermione tapped a pencil of still olive-green light. "Cedar, most likely, with a thin vein of purple lead cradled inside its pattern. One encased inside another, one thing that he could clearly see did not belong, and yet it was not a broken pattern. The pencil was a whole that consisted of two very different things, just as his cat-owl, brown-blue hybrid had been whole and unbroken before he destroyed the evidence of his tampering with animal forms. The veil could also be the bridge the brothers created that thwarted Death." Hermione slowly mused. "We could be wrong in our assumption that Aelia was the one to create it, or perhaps in the creation of the Hallows they further manipulated what she started. Or maybe she made the archway itself, and they the veil inside it." Her words trailed off into an unintelligible hum of thought. Harry remembered how the veil had swayed in a wind from some other place, its color a kaleidoscope of powerful light, shining in every possible shade behind its black-white shadows. He started speaking slowly, gaining momentum as he voiced his theory. "I think that death, as a place that souls go between reincarnations, can be accessed through that archway. I feel, and this is irrational, not based on anything I can realistically test at this time, but I feel like the chamber was always meant to be a place where a living person could go to make peace with the fact that others were no longer among the living, to accept death as a legitimate state of being, a necessary part of the circle of life. But by creating the veil, or any door, that acceptance has been shattered. How are you accepting death if you're seeking to bring someone back from it, or entering it yourself while intending to return?" The question lingered in the air, Harry's thoughts turning inward as he continued. And maybe that kind of acceptance would only apply to oneself and not others. Accepting your own death versus accepting that of a loved one, or perhaps vice versa. But that can't be right. Harry stood and began to pace, eyes closed as he studied the floor underneath his feet, how stone met stone, stone patterns within floor patterns within a greater house pattern. How had he never noticed how no pattern was isolated from a whole? How had he never considered that to change one facet was to affect a greater design? He paused, facing Hermione, and looked into her face as he continued. "The very act of living is fighting against death. We eat and drink, we breathe, we move through time. Just because we accept that death is necessary would not mean suicide, or declining medical care, or not defending oneself." nor that we would not mourn the loss of a loved one and seek to reach them again with whatever means we could. But what Alia did, she decided that death was something she could control. She could decide when and if death should occur. She not only fought against it, she sought to overcome it. True immortality for her, and for all those she forced to linger in undead forms against their will and under her control. Hermione walked toward him, her hands warm and soft when they grasped his own. Sounds like she was a master of death. Harry stared down into her blue-violet light, watched how it touched his own emerald color and lay against it. If you can create a door, you can shut or open it whenever you please, until that door is shattered, or the veil that covers it torn apart. Pure speculation, but I would think based on comments made by the shades that the essence of time and death are entwined together. Perhaps time caught up with Alia when her hold on death was broken. If she had lived as long as speculated, she would have turned into an emaciated corpse in moments. But the consequences of what she did are still present. The veil, and now I believe the Hallows as well, the three brothers having gotten themselves and their experiments into the death chamber at some point. Hermione tilted her head, the smell of her soap comfortingly familiar as occasional strands of wild hair brushed his neck. How does this affect what you hope to do with the vampires? Harry looked up into the purple light of the ceiling, eyes narrowed in thoughtful calculation. Then he smiled. If time and death truly are intertwined, then I think now that the solution is much more simple than I first considered. The only problem will be convincing the vampires that the cure is worth the cost. She was silent only a moment, before her incredulous laugh echoed into the room. You can't, you mean, make them mortal. He smiled at her upturned face, raising a hand to caress the light that shone in every strand of blue-violet hair. I love how we think alike. And holding her in his arms, he rather thought he loved everything about her. Albus Dumbledore sat back in his armchair, a long, slender wand cradled in both hands, staring down into its mundane surface. It was a pale, flat white with deep grey shadows in every ripple and wave carved into the elegant design. But not as flashy as many wands he had seen, nor the whitest or the most beautiful. It was functional. It lay like a motionless serpent in the shadow of a tree, poisonous only when it chose to attack. He hadn't used it much in the last few years, preferring a wand of brown oak for formal functions. He hadn't liked the way the wand had been whispering lately, singing a barely audible tune of magic that rose in the presence of others, bringing a gleam to their eyes and a twist to their mouths. They wouldn't understand why they were suddenly more ruthless, nor why they abruptly disliked what Dumbledore had to say. Why they might lay in their beds that night and wonder how they might strike at the Supreme Mugwump's back when he least expected it, nor why they might find themselves in the Ministry records a day later, looking for the place the older wizard lived. 3 since the beginning of the year, almost 1 a month, had come to his door. Too confused, unsure until they stood face to face while they held their wands tight in their hands. The third, and most recent, had not been confused. His youthful face had been twisted with malice, a descendant from a dark family who had focused on Dumbledore in the last days as the reason his aunt had fallen to Aurors years before. Unreasonable, of course. The wizard had smiled to his face weeks before when they met at a pointless ministry gala, when Dumbledore raised the elder wand to vanish the stain of wine from his robes with a thoughtless motion. All three had been easily defeated, and their memory of him and his wand's song erased completely. They would wake on the night bus wondering why they were there, and where they were going, and what magic they might have dealt with to make them lose themselves. Years ago, he could count having one wizard come to his office or his door in a year. But the wand, it seemed, was not content to let Dumbledore go to his death unchallenged and undefeated. It sang, and it whispered, and it schemed. Almost he wondered if it hated him. He certainly hated it, the thing that brought his closest friend to ruin. The thing that he had truly fought against, when he stood across from the handsome brown-haired wizard and cast magic on a scale that made the earth crack open and bleed molten rock. The sky split with electricity. And he knew that eventually it would not be an average wizard whose ear caught the wand's song. Each attacker had been gaining in strength, more attuned and more vicious with more purpose. No longer were they weak of mind and spirit and magic. They were intelligent, growing masters of their specific caste. The last, the Death Eater's son, had just gained an esteemed position in the aura department, despite his family's reputation. His magic had made the ground tremble and broken the stone steps that led to his door. "Why are you doing this?" Albus whispered to the wand, hating the tremble in his voice, in his hands, the weakness that came with age. He hated how much slower he was now than he used to be, how much less control and finesse he had, how much he longed for peace. The wand merely lay there, innocent and quiet. It had stopped singing to him years ago. He had left it locked in magical safes, only for it to appear in his pocket. He had left it bundled tightly in leather and strapped to his arm, only for it to appear in his hand instead when the oak wand should have. He had unconsciously begun to reach for it in the last Wisengamot meeting, only to pause at the last second, fingers knowing the dangerous ridges and dips of the wand that would bring him to ruin too if he let it. Just like Gellert. It would be his death if he didn't do something. One day when he was truly off guard in Diagon Alley, or when he became too weak to duel, or when he slept in his bed at rest, a wizard would kill him, because the wand always sang of death. Because he remembered standing over the disarmed Gellert with the wand in his hand, shaking, his whole body shaking, because he had been so tempted to end it all, and it had seemed such a reasonable thing. Even better. Better to kill Gellert then, instead of banishing him to prison for the rest of his considerably long life. Better to kill him in his vibrant youth and beauty than rotting away in a dimly lit cell. Better to stop his poison than to potentially let it seep out of such a cell to taint and manipulate others. And the only thing that had stopped him had been the memory of Gellert Grindelwald before the endless search for the Hallows had brought him down into darkness, twisting his mind with temptation of omnipotent power, twisting all the good things he had wanted to accomplish into dark, evil deeds. Love had given him mercy when cold reason would have given him death. Albus wilted into his chair, face falling in an old grief that would never quite fade away. He couldn't let the wand have its deathly way. He had to do something, something he hadn't yet let himself consider in the decades he had held the wand secret and safe. "This place is insane. Insane," Dudley muttered by his side, the muggle twisting his considerable body from side to side as they walked through Diagon Alley, no doubt gawking at all the magical things that were the opposite of normal. Witches and wizards passing them seemed equally fascinated, though more likely because Dudley appeared as muggle as a muggle could be. Harry hadn't even considered trying to hide his cousin's status under wizarding robes. That might have been a mistake, but at least none of them were currently paying attention to him, disguised as he was under a mix of hair-changing, voice-changing, and skin color-changing charms. "You sure Hermione's not going to notice? That one guy just took a picture of us, I swear." Dudley continued. "Is it me? 'Cause I feel really weird here, really weird." "It's me, don't worry," Harry reassured, even as he wondered if it was his eyes that had given them away to the one eagle-eyed photographer. It was the only thing he hadn't changed. He was even using the lion-headed cane. And Hermione's sitting her exams. Plus, she doesn't read the sort of newspapers that print random photos of me in Diagon. Dudley walked a bit faster, his color agitated. "Why am I here again?" Harry fought not to roll his eyes, even as he heard Vaughn muffle a laugh behind them. "Because," Harry began, "it was you who said guys normally bring their best friends to help them pick out engagement rings. Congratulations." Dudley muttered something under his breath that Harry didn't catch, but he could guess what it was. After all, Dudley was probably thinking they would go to a mundane jewelry store, something he had considered as well. But he didn't feel like learning permanent sizing and unbreakable charms specific to women's wedding bands, which was what it would take. Better to go to a professional. "Here it is," Vaughn announced as they approached one in a long line of stores, its painted sign unintelligible to Harry. "The best, according to my mother." "Brilliant," Dudley muttered. "Half the jewelry in there looks like it might bite." "I wouldn't touch anything, just in case," Vaughn said with a grin in his voice. Harry sighed as Dudley light-heartedly punched the wizard in the shoulder in response, causing the man to stumble back with a groan. His cousin really didn't know his own strength. A bell chimed as they entered, and from 3 different directions souls fluttered to them with quick steps. "Welcome, gentlemen," Pink gasped in a male voice, joy practically shining from him in waves. "Whatever can we help you with?" Purple this time, a feminine voice that muscled its way past Pink with an elegant movement. "We have everything. Yellow folded arms behind them with a grumble. Harry decided at once that if he ever opened a jewelry store, which was never, he would not pay his employees on commission. This felt like being inside a baited shark cage. Ah, Harry stammered. Well, no help needed. Vaughn declared, taking hold of Harry and Dudley both with firm hands. We'll tell you if we need anything. We have refreshments. Yellow declared behind them as Vaughn steered them to the left, where multicolored jewelry shone under waves of charmed light and purple glass. The glass might be a problem. He still wasn't very competent at seeing through walls. Vultures, Dudley muttered. Same here as in a normal store. Harry only stared as Vaughn came to a stop, abruptly anxious. There were just so many pinpricks of purple light on display, and they all looked the same. So what kind of jewelry does Hermione like to wear? Vaughn asked. Harry faltered, heart falling further. Not sure. This had really seemed like a great idea at the time. Need a ring? Go to a jewelry store. Gold or silver? Vaughn sounded slightly miffed. Small or big? Well, he could answer that at least. Everything she has is yellow gold, mostly 14 carats. It's a bit hard to tell carats, but there's a very slight. Okay, gold. That cuts the options in half. Vaughn interrupted, face swinging back and forth before taking a quick look over their shoulder where yellow, pink, and purple circled, just like sharks. They obviously could smell the blood in the water. Does it really matter? Dudley was shifting anxiously. She'll probably love anything you get. Of course it matters, Harry grumbled. She'll have it forever. You hope anyway. Dudley said, then held his hands up in defense at Harry's glare. I just meant she might lose it. Not that she would ever, get tired and leave with half your stuff or anything. Wizarding rings don't get lost by accident. Vaughn interrupted before Harry could turn his cousin into a rat. Not if they're properly spelled, which this one will be. We don't have to worry about size either. There's a charm for that. His tone implied great relief, though Harry was perfectly aware of just what size Hermione's fingers were. They were just the right size. Harry focused on the rings. It wasn't hard to separate what was gold from silver and platinum, and what was yellow gold from white, though all metals and stones were basically purple. The shades were easily discernible, less easy to see the details that made each ring unique. The rings were just so small, most were simple blobs of circular or oblong light. This was a disaster. Do you want it to have a stone on it, and what kind and how many? At Harry's lost look, Vaughn groaned. Okay, what's her favorite stone? Dudley made a humorous snort when he only groaned in response. Why not let her pick out the ring? That's what some girls do now. It's so much easier. You told me the guy has to pick it out, Harry accused. That it shows how thoughtful you are. Well, it does, Dudley admitted. But I think some girls just got tired with their boyfriends picking out ugly rings that they get stuck with. Wizards don't make witches pick out their own wedding rings. Vaughn cut in. That's so rude. I'm picking out a ring, Harry snapped. Okay, and I think just one stone maybe, emerald. He was going with his gut now. Nothing made him make decisions like the pressure to escape this store and his bickering friends. Emerald, Dudley was skeptical. I'm pretty sure most women want diamonds, the bigger the better. That's true. Vaughn agreed and the two men shared a nod and a word. Diamonds, Hermione's, not most women, Harry stated, then immediately faltered. Because more was better, right? But maybe some small diamonds beside the emerald. Dudley nodded sagely. Now we're talking. Emeralds are a great choice. Pink gushed behind them. They symbolize rebirth and an abundance of magic and life force. Why, until the last generation, most witches preferred colored stone over the more plain white diamonds. I don't think he's ready for an abundance of life force. Dudley guffawed. He's going a little pale. Harry was indeed leaning away from the man, though he rather thought the symbolism nonsense was just that, nonsense. Still, they were talking about magic. We got it, Vaughn said with a slight growl, and Pink scampered back away with a weakly cheerful wave. Just do what you think best, Harry. You know her better than either of us, and emeralds won't get her pregnant. That's your job. Dudley's laughed again, slapping the other man's back in a move that almost sent the wizard falling for the second time that day. I like this guy. Just help me pick a ring, please. He knew he sounded desperate, but he was. Sometimes honesty was the best policy. And no one is getting pregnant. There was a gasp behind them before a yellow soul began whispering rapidly with her fellow pink coworker. Harry fought the urge to throw something. He was not a violent person by nature, but this situation was only deteriorating. That one might make it into Witch Weekly if she plays her cards right. Vaughn mused. I can already see the headline, Blind Sorcerer to Propose to Preg. Don't say that word again, Harry hissed. Plus there's no way she recognized me. Now show me which bloody golden rings have emeralds. Merlin, who pissed in your boots, Vaughn grumbled, reaching to move several rings from the crowd to place them on a separate glass surface in front of them. I suppose price isn't important. Dudley reached a hand out to fiddle with one of the purple objects. This one is nice. It's all sparkly, very erudite. Harry grumbled, but accepted the small ring, raising it closer to his face. Purple on purple on purple. This was going to be just as hard as he thought. Now this is an establishment I can get comfortable in, Dudley declared, leaning back in the rickety booth with an empty mug in front of him. Though I still say they got a better selection in a place down by my flat, and cheaper. Harry shrugged. The leaky cauldron borders a muggle street. Every once in a while a muggle stumbles in, so they keep things relatively low-key, plus it's just a pub. Most magical people just pass through to Diagon. A moment of silence as Dudley nodded before folding one burly arm over the other. You happy, Harry, with the ring, with your plans? He smiled, though his nerves kept it from being a completely genuine gesture. I'm excited. I'll be happy when she says yes. His cousin snorted. I like your confidence. When, not if. Bangladesh Green approached, weaving through the colorful people that clustered around a table nearby, carrying 3 more green mugs that he slapped down on the table with a flourish. I still got it. Worked here when I was young and crazy. Here, Harry asked dubiously. At the leaky cauldron. Vaughn slid in beside him, green mouth curling into a grin. I said crazy, meant ambitious. Wanted out from under my parents' thumb while in the academy. Worked long enough hours I could barely hold my wand in dueling practice. Old Mad Eye nearly killed me more than a few times. That's amazing, Harry said and meant it. I don't know how you found the time. You can never find time, not really. The Exora mused. Just got to carve it out from something else. In my case, I had no social life. Looking back, I might as well have stayed with my parents. All I ever saw of my infinitesimally small flat was the bed and the shower. At least at home I didn't have to do laundry or cook meals. Exactly, Dudley agreed. I hate cooking. It never tastes right when I actually try at it, so why try? Harry only shook his head. He supposed he had literally nothing to complain about in either respect. He wasn't even sure how the house elves cleaned laundry, and he wasn't about to actually try his own hand at cooking. Could Hermione cook? Would she want to? Probably not. Earth to Harry. His cousin's voice brought him out of his reverie. So, satisfied with this adventure? Sure. He frowned down at his cup. I was thinking of going to talk to Aunt Petunia, though. Show it to her. Just get her advice, you know. Dudley blew out a breath, reached for a mug to lift it up with a salute. Better you than me. Vaughn lifted his own. A toast I fully support. Better you than me. And laughing, the two clicked the ancient wood of their glasses together. Crystal blue liquid sparkling, as it fell over the rims to splash across the forest green table. 2 wizards leaned against a wall on one side of the Dursleys' front porch, behind the vibrant green of Aunt Petunia's prize rose bush. He could barely make them out behind a second layered invisibility and sound muffling ward. It was a good design, the lines seamless and smooth. Mr. Clifton was training his employees far better than he could have predicted when he first contacted the Muggle-born training agency, and at a quick pace. Already he had seen minor adjustments in the house's familiar colors, small flickers of magic in windows and doors that lay supine like cats basking in the sun. Yellow jinxes and red charms to catch an intruder that might slip past the outer wards and attempt to enter the house. It took a Muggle-born to understand that not all intruders might be magical enough to trigger the wards themselves, and that a mundane person could do just as much damage with their Muggle technology as a witch or wizard. It was only a matter of time before Muggles were contracted for just that reason by one malicious wizard or another, who felt the cause was worth bucking the statute of secrecy, or one that simply knew that said Muggle could have his or her memory wiped after a job well done. Probably without even paying them. Harry took a deep breath, staring fixedly at the doorknob with its gleaming purple brass handle. Time to get this over with. Then he knocked and waited, shifting weight from foot to foot. Did he really need to ask his aunt's opinion? Couldn't he just surprise her later? She would be furious, of course, to be the last to know. but she would forgive him eventually, probably by the time she got grandchildren. The door swung wide, his aunt's happy exclamation of his name the only warning he had before she wrapped him in her slender arms and squeezed with all her not inconsiderable strength. "Hi, Aunt Petunia," Harry gasped as she stepped back to pull him inside. A nice day outside. Now that was lame. He wanted to kick himself for the world's most telling greeting to the world's best gatherer of gossip. And as he expected, her light immediately ramped up its pace as she not so gently pushed him into a kitchen chair and slid in across from him. He was grateful she pushed a ceramic plate towards him that held the familiar lumps of chocolate chip cookies before she began her interrogation, though. "It's overcast and humid." Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "But my bulbs need the rain that's coming, so it is indeed a nice day." Harry shifted nervously, fingers fiddling with the carved wood of his staff that he leaned against the table. "Well, that's good then. Rain. Just say it, just say it." The silence grew. "Well, I came over to get your opinion." His aunt sat up even straighter in her chair, a feat he hadn't been sure was possible. She was practically vibrating with intensity now. "I'm always here for both my boys," she declared proudly, pushing the cookies even closer. He picked one up to give his hand something to do, turning the crumbling thing over in his gloved hands twice before putting it back down again. "I'm going to ask Hermione to marry me." Her gasp rang through the air at that statement. "Not right away, but soon. This summer, maybe. I thought about going on vacation somewhere, but never mind that. I got this ring, and I think she'll like it, but I'm not sure, so I thought, let me see it." She was holding out one hand now, the other over her heart. "Oh, Harry, this is so exciting." He reached inside his robe pocket and pulled out the small decorative wooden box, its green edges detailed with sparkling magical white swirls that contained the shop's logo. He guessed anyway. It was hard to tell. His aunt flipped the lid and let out a noise that sounded like a very pleased banshee. "Oh, Harry." And to his horror, she sniffled. Harry leaned back in his chair, now more certain than ever that his was not a wise choice. "Just my allergies, dear." His aunt soothed after another sniffle. "This is beautiful, truly. Thank you," Harry muttered, and accepted back the box when she clicked it closed. It was hard to pick one. They were all so similar. "Oh dear, but this one is different from all the others because you picked it," his aunt stated simply, and the words soothed an anxious part of him he hadn't fully realized was there. "Now, tell me more about your summer plans." Harry smiled, reaching out to snatch his discarded cookie off the table. Might as well settle in. His aunt wasn't going to let him escape until she heard every last possible detail. Hermione stood in front of the dilapidated building and checked the address one more time just to be certain. This can't be it. Nope. This was most certainly it. She frowned, glancing again up and down the dusty street, lined with crumbling brick houses and the occasional leaning ancient street lamp. In the persistent fog, she could just make out the large chimney of a mill, no smoke rising from its stack to join the mist. "This place reeks of a trap." Fergus Fallen muttered next to her, burly arms crossed with his wand in hand. "Or a Death Eater lair, which it is. You're just prejudiced, which is why I wanted to come alone." Hermione repeated words she had said more than once since her guard had discovered she planned to take up an apprenticeship with Severus Snape, potions master and former professor at Hogwarts. Also former convicted Death Eater. But really, everyone was stupid when they were young at least once or twice, right? And Dumbledore had vouched for him, a fact Fallen had reluctantly admitted to when she pressed him for details. Eventually, they had come to a compromise. Fallen would escort her to her first meeting with the Dower Master and confirm that the wards were up to his standards. Then she would be allowed to go to her classes alone, which was exactly what she wanted. She highly doubted someone was going to attempt to kidnap her from the doorstep of Master Snape, especially since no one other than her parents and Harry were aware of her apprenticeship. Just how often did people try such things, anyway? She did wonder if Harry wasn't just a little paranoid. Or a lot. But Harry paid Fallen to think of everything, and she reluctantly had to acknowledge that such an attempt would probably come when she least expected it. "We've triggered a proximity alarm." Fallen's voice jolted her from her unhappy thoughts. "Decent warding." His reluctant tone brought a smile back to her face. "Then he's expecting us. Splendid." And she stepped for the small porch in front of her, the wooden door looking as old and rotting as just about everything else on the street. It swung open even as she stepped up the first brick stair step, and the wizard that waited for them had the same familiar scowl she was used to from the few months she had spent in his class at Hogwarts years ago. Miss Granger, black eyes narrowed at the form behind her. Aura fallen. Retired. The older man grumbled back. Humph, was Snape's only response to that as he stepped back, one hand elegantly raised to gesture them inside. I will key your signature into my wards, Miss Granger, between the hours of 8 a.m. and midnight. You will occasionally be required to stay overnight in the brewing of potions, and we will make further arrangements at that point. He slammed the door behind them, and Hermione glanced around the dimly lit foyer and blinked in surprise, because the house didn't look very magical at all, not like Grimmauld Place with its moving portraits and immaculate clean floorboards lit by bright magical light. It looked, if anything, a lot like her great-aunt's old house. Old electric lamps were nailed to flaking floral wallpapered walls, dark with disuse. There were fluorescent bulbs on the ceiling. Hermione stared up at them, unsure how to take in that detail. Magic didn't like fluorescence. The powerful electrical discharge of nearby spells would blow them out every time, to Harry's ongoing frustration in experiments with the phenomenon. And sure, these weren't exactly working at the moment, but their presence meant this was a mundane house. Why would a wizard, a Slytherin, live in a mundane house? Fallen poked her sharply, and she realized Snape was moving into a lighted doorway down the foyer hall. She quickly stepped to follow and sighed in immediate love at first sight. A library. A very, very well-stocked library. Now thigh-s she had expected and greatly looked forward to. Dark brown shelves housed hundreds of leather-bound books that she could see, rolls of parchments occasionally peeking between volumes. Her hands itched to find out what they might contain. You claim you are talented. The baritone voice brought her eyes back to the slender wizard who had sat in one dark leather chair in the center of the space. And intelligent. I have no patience for fools or for laziness, less for liars who waste my time. I will expect you to give all of your attention and talent while you study with me. I am participating in several delicate projects at this time which, when you have proven yourself, you will assist me with. In the meantime, I will allow you access to everything in this library and give you a list of books I consider invaluable to any who wish to learn the delicate art of brewing potions of any caliber. Hermione nodded eagerly, resisting the urge to bounce on her feet. Yes, please. One black eyebrow raised, before the man turned his attention to the wizard who still stood at her back, looking around with a consternated expression. Am I to take it that you will be present with Miss Granger at all times? I just need to check the strength of your wards before I go. How Fallen made that statement accusatory she wasn't certain, but she heard the emotion nonetheless. Miss Granger's safety is very important. No doubt. Disdain evident, Snape lifted a dismissive hand and waved Fallen away, for all the world like he was shooing off a naughty dog. Check away. For a long second Fallen stood his ground, mouth set in a firm grimace. She might even have heard teeth grinding. Then the wizard turned with a squeak of his boothils to stomp from the room, wand rising to emit light as he entered the dark highway. Let's begin. Hermione turned back at the commanding words. With correct identification of the common magical and non-magical flora and fauna ingredients in most potions. Once I ascertain your level of knowledge, we will move on to ingredient preparation techniques. Hermione took a deep breath and sat, looking down at the large book opened on a wide table between their chairs, large illustrations drawn across its pages. I'm ready, sir. Master Snape didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either, a mark she put in her favor. Only pointed to the first picture with one long, stained finger, a broadleaf plant with 3 leaves and a thick stem. Identify. She straightened her spine, and for the next grueling 5 hours, flipped through 3 volumes of plants and flowers, small animals and large ones, and more than a few anatomy drawings of stomachs and spleens and brains and eyes that turned even her hardened stomach, and considered it a great failing that she only could accurately identify 75% of the contents. A potioneer is only as good as his potions, and his potions are only as good as his ingredients. Master Snape concluded as he placed a 5th book on the growing stack beside her bag. For many potions, the wrong ingredient merely ruins the potion. But for others, The reaction can mean your life, the contents of your brewing room, or even your dwelling. In sum, the wrong item at the wrong time can destroy the very street you live on. There is a reason most breweries are located underground under separate warding structures. You must be more than adequate at identifying the look and major properties of everything that enters into your potion, down to the very water that might make up its base. Even something as basic as water is not the same, varying in levels of purity depending on its source. Hermione nodded, for what felt like the thousandth time that afternoon. She had stopped replying with, "Yes, sir," before Fallen had even apparated out. Snape didn't need verbal acknowledgement to continue a lecture, and the wizard she was finding could out-lecture any of her mundane professors. He was brilliant. So brilliant, she felt like an idiot standing next to him. It was no wonder Neville had considered it such a coup to have the wizard working on improving the Wolfsbane potion. And it was all the more obvious how idiotic the majority of wizards and witches were to not have prospective potioneers knocking the man's door down with pleas to be his apprentice. Of course, the man was also more than a bit of an rude ass. "You are adequate, Miss Granger. Tomorrow we will move on to various preparatory techniques in my brewery down the hall. Meanwhile, you will study and learn the contents of these books over the next months, and perhaps become better than merely adequate." She nodded quickly, and though she had never settled for adequate anything in her entire life, still felt like adequate from this man was pretty much excellent from anyone else. "Thank you, sir." Severus Snape scowled at her, arms folding where he stood. "Dismissed. I will see you at precisely 8 tomorrow morning." "Thank you," she said again, just to see his scowl deepen, and hid her grin as she scooped up the books and prepared herself for apparition. The last glimpse she had of Spinner's End was Master Snape's severe expression. Black eyes narrowed at her in apparent disapproval. Harry sat at the large purple desk in his laboratory, gesturing for his guests to sit across from him. Creature's yellow form had given some harsh words earlier about Harry's proclivity to invite people directly into his lab, instead of the perfectly good sitting room. He had simply explained that he liked to discuss work in his workspace. He'd saved the sitting room for politics and family. That had soothed the house elf's ruffled feathers a bit. More so, when Harry suggested the elf serve any refreshments he deemed appropriate for the circumstance of business partners meeting to discuss business. It never hurt to suggest the house elf do what he wanted to do anyway, and would have done even if Harry didn't suggest it. It almost made Harry wonder if the house elf baked something every day for the express purpose of having it ready if guests arrived at their doorstep. Interesting space. Philip Clifton began, choosing a metal chair with cautious movements, his reddish-brown color sparkling with interest. "This isn't stainless steel, is it?" "No," Harry answered the owner of JTP, "but it works." The older wizard only hummed in thought. Beside him, twin souls flopped into their own chairs after first conjuring soft cushions weaved of twisting green and blue light. "Cushions help," Fred offered conspiratorially. "I'm Fred Weasley, this is George." George Weasley helpfully supplied. "We run Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, don't think we've met." "Philip Clifton, I operate job training and placement down Diagon Alley." At the man's words, Harry saw the excitement bloom across their bronze and copper souls the way a flower bloomed under sunlight. They understood immediately what the purpose was for this meeting. Clifton wasn't quite so quick, though to his credit, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Yet, the mallow-hued man merely sat there, fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair, quietly observing, waiting. "I have a new business proposition for you," Harry began, speaking to Clifton. "Something the four of us could begin together. I have already spoken separately to Fred and George about this idea over the past few months. After seeing the success I have had with your security details, the improvements you have made, I believe there is opportunity for more." "You're Muggle-born, right, or half-blood?" Fred asked eagerly. He only waited for a nod before he continued, tact lacking in his eagerness. "Doesn't matter. You know about Muggle technology, the manufactories and such, making a lot of stuff fast." Clifton's chin lifted. "It's called mass production, usually using an assembly line style of factory. Every person along the line has a small, simple job which streamlines the process." George spoke this time, leaning forward. "Which makes products faster to make and cheaper, right? In bulk." Clifton's head slanted toward Harry before he faced the twins again, hands folded now in his lap. He was, no doubt, putting two and two together to make four. Something can be lost in quality if done improperly, but yes, generally this makes faster production and cheaper products. Much depends on materials involved and how complicated the process is, however. Harry spoke up, smiling. The wizarding world possesses no factories. Partly this is due to simply not needing them. We are a small population in generally small places and able to do much with magic alone. But it's also because we haven't caught up with Muggle technology. There is an opportunity here as I can see it. Utilizing magic, mass production on the scale that Muggles achieve with their robotics, can be in reach. We simply need to build a facility and train skilled witches and wizards in transfigurative and transmorphing spells that could be used in this process. We would have to make a process first, Clifton said, and decide what we wish to start creating. Then figure out how to even acquire the amount of raw materials needed to fill an assembly line and keep it running. A factory itself is only one facet of a process I don't even fully understand. I've never had any experience in manufacturing, but I know it's not something one can start up overnight, which is why we won't. Harry looked toward the twins and nodded. The Weasleys are geniuses at creating new inventions. They've come up with ideas for defensive and offensive jewelry and clothing that we can start with. I also believe that there is an opportunity in the potions market. Non-Mordia will be up and running within a year, and producing plants for many basic potions in less than 2. Within 5, if they do well with establishing the houses and training or recruiting herbologists, rare ingredients might become easily available. And if Neville has anything to say about it, you can cut that estimate in half. Fred helpfully supplied. Plus my brother, and I've got some ideas involving the pre-spelled charm market that involves lots of everyday things, not just jewelry. George finished that thought. We just don't have enough time or manpower to make all of our thoughts reality, which I can see is where I would come in. Clifton's deep voice rumbled. I supply labor. Skilled labor. Harry clarified. People with the aptitude and willingness to learn multiple disciplines. We don't just need charm or transfiguration specialists, and the work will not be easy, especially in the beginning. The first round of people trained will no doubt be training another round within a few years when we expand. Clifton laughed, and Harry could see it now, the rising excitement, the quick beating of his heart. The idea was already growing into a plan in his mind. That is not so unusual in the outside world, and we would be equal partners in this venture. The first of many to hear you talk. Harry spread his arms, grinned. I'm in the same boat Fred and George are. I don't have the time or power to do this myself. None of us do and still run our other businesses and have a real life. But together, as equal partners, we can begin. We bring in more people as it's necessary, but we 4 will be the founding members. Of what exactly? We got a name for this partnership, Clifton questioned. Fred and George both laughed, the sound echoing eerily across the room, like 2 bells rung at the same exact moment. CPW, Fred quipped, George taking up his brother's line of thought without a pause. Clifton, Potter, Weasleys can produce well. Perhaps decide on a name later. Clifton mused as Harry grinned. Then you're in. The Merlot man straightened his shoulders, held out one hand to shake and seal the deal. This has the potential to employ all I have waiting and more. I'd be a fool to say no, and I'm no fool. We're the foolish ones in this quartet. Fred chimed, giving his brother a high five. Which means we brought our notes and sketches and a few samples we've been working on for his lordship Harry here. George lifted a bag high. Fools are full of hope, after all. I'm feeling my age. Clifton muttered, the words barely audible as the twins began to pull items out to place them on the desk with exaggerated exuberance. Harry smiled over at him. Welcome to CPW. Even your funds are not limitless. The goblin's voice was a hiss and a growl, politely snide in a way only the small beings could manage. Perhaps it was the teeth. Your security expenses have created quite the drain on any profits from your investments so far. Unless you create an additional revenue stream soon, you will find your accounts decreasing in monetary value each year. Implied was that this result was worse than torture and death. Perhaps to a goblin it would be. I have a new investment plan. Harry slid the parchment across the purple desk, watched his account manager's orange features twist with a snarl. This would empty half of the Potter vault. When it's fully implemented, yes. By my estimate anyway, though if the prices of resources fluctuate it could be more or less. But I calculate the payback to be less than 5 years, with every year after bringing in twice as much as my current dividends. The wizarding version of a stock market was not a mirror of its muggle counterpart, but it was also influenced by much the same effects, public sentiment and politics, and all the backroom deals involved in affecting both. Harry let his manager deal with choosing where to put his money, because there was no one he knew with more incentive than a goblin who had his own fortune and standing tied to Harry's own. But this teamwork also meant, occasionally, they were at odds on just what to do with said fortune. Usually about every time Harry picked his own pet project. Look at the figures, the projected income. Harry encouraged. Think of Nan Mordia. Nan Mordia, the werewolf haven that was turning into a bustling town, with a school now and an apothecary and a small healer's clinic, all staffed by werewolves and their families. The greenhouses that were rising out of the ground like giant dragon skeletons of metal and wood and glass, plants on neat rows inside, the potential wealth not in gold, but in living green things that would produce, and produce again, and produce again under careful hands. Wealth contained in infinite potential instead of a simple finite resource. This is not exactly the same. The orange being cautioned, sharp teeth bared in a grimace. I will run the numbers. More like he would recheck Harry's own calculations against his own information on current markets, which was all well and good by Harry. He knew the potential was there, and he knew the goblin would see it too. One only had to look in the right place and dream. Thank you. Harry stood, nodded to his manager, the elderly goblin who went simply by one word. Shrew. He had yet to learn why goblins called themselves what they did. He had an inkling that they each had 2 names, or perhaps even 3. The names they gave themselves, the names they gave each other, the names they gave to the public. Most were 2 words, or even 3, the translation from their own language to English haphazard at best. But he figured Shrew had earned his name, because the cunning creature had more than a bit of wicked talent when it came to squeezing gold out of dull stone. Until our next meeting. The dismissal was obvious, and Harry turned away, not offended in the least. His manager never had time for goodbyes or well wishes. Harry walked through the purple halls of Gringotts, a red soul slinking from a corner to shadow him as he approached the exit. Vaughn was not with him this visit, taking time off for a family occasion. His replacement was a quiet muggle-born witch whose watchful soul pressed upon his own magic like the steadying hand of an escort during a dance. The witch was ready for trouble on her first day, more than ready. She was burning up with adrenaline. He hoped she would calm down soon, because the flicking of her light was distracting. Diagon Alley was just beginning to come awake, the shopkeepers opening their doors, bells chiming with the movements. Harry walked down the purple cobblestone path that wound like a snake through the crooked green buildings with their sparkling red and white charms, all under the constant golden sky of the alley's overwhelming defensive wards. Harry breathed in the scent of breakfasts being made to sell, the sounds of the menagerie's animals waking to sunlight, the chatter of hundreds of people just beginning or ending their day. Then he reached the narrow corridor that dipped down uneven steps into Nocturne Alley, and he slipped between the purple walls to take those steps with careful movements. The witch behind him pulsed with red light, a slender verdant wand bearing scarlet fire sliding into one hand. But she said nothing, and she followed him without hesitation. Good. He would have preferred Vaughn be with him for this, and if he would have asked the wizard, he would have cancelled his plans. But Harry relied on Vaughn too much as it was. No person should bear the burden of being indispensable. The buildings of Nocturne were just as crooked as Diagon, but in a less orderly manner. Their wards were not elegant things of beauty, but haphazard splashes of colour, red charms and yellow jinxes, woven between green offensive wards and golden protective ones. The Krupp was an exception to the rule, stronger wards and a harsher presence, its purple stone and green wood seeming a deeper hue with the power lurking inside its walls. A person knew when they stepped upon its entranceway and opened its door, before they even felt the unnatural heat inside, that they were dealing with creatures it would be wise to treat with polite civility. Brendan waited for him inside, a black shadow in an open doorway at the rear of the storefront. "Wait here by the door," Harry told his guard, and counted it to her credit that she did not argue with him. Vaughn would have, but Vaughn was more of his friend now than his employee. Brendan led him to the white-warded room from his last visit, the vampire's movements silent as the grave, no breath disturbing the air, no pulses of light from a beating heart. Only carbon black, veined with slim rivulets of borrowed green and blue life. Then the door closed, and the vampire breathed, sucking in air to let it out again into words. "You've learned something." Harry leaned against his staff, the wood rough and familiar under his touch. "I suspect something. I've reached the point where I'll need a subject to study in order to progress." Silence pooling between them, and Harry counted the seconds and speculated whether or not they were really minutes instead. "You will use me," Brendan announced, "and our bandit who you already know." "Hill," Harry guessed, and saw a black hand move up, a head dip down in a nod. "Aren't you afraid I might hurt you? Why not use another vampire?" A hiss of air, a wet sound of laughter that sent a chill down his spine. His instincts knew that sound. It was danger. "I'm the oldest of us in this place, and we have an heir already in place. Of us all, I am the one who needs help the most." The vampire said I'm in singular. He separates himself from his family and the ones who donate blood. Harry figured there was more meaning than he could comprehend yet in that distinction. "The only thing I can promise is that I'll try not to let you perish. Permanently." How else to put it? He suspected vampires, like many dark creatures, could sense a lie, and Harry was perfectly aware at this point that death in some form would be necessary. Another laugh. "You don't promise it won't hurt then?" "No," Harry said simply, "or that you will like it once you're fixed." Silence again, the kind that felt full of potential, of muscles coiling for action. His own power responded independently of his control, rising from his skin in instinctive reaction. Something about vampires made him aware of his own mortality. The cloak upon his shoulders shifted, silk against skin, and the emerald light calmed and Harry could breathe again, unaware that he had been holding his breath. And as if waiting for that signal, Brendan spoke. "We all live with pain. No other words or reassurances or demands. Simple words and a simple sentiment. Living was worth the pain. This summer, the 3 nights of every weekend, at my home, at true dark until dawn. I will give you a flu password active at those times, only for yourself and Hill, no others. And when summer is over." Harry paused on his way to the door, but didn't turn. He didn't need to turn to see the black shadow where it stood, highlighted against the shining white wards. "You can decide if you like your new existence and want to share it with others." A hit wizard lady. The witch knelt before her, olive branches cradled in her hands. "He's responsible for breaking the wards. He's the key piece my whispers have found." A beautiful witch, with brunette hair that tumbled down in waves, eyes as blue as the ocean at sunrise. So beautiful she never would have tolerated her if the woman was not so useful, and most of all loyal. Only one. The minister is tenacious, but he gained no ground until the days after the unsuccessful assassination attempt. There is a new factor at play, and one common thread in every game we should have won, and didn't. One-hit wizard squad with 3 new members. It will take time to isolate which one is the ward breaker and who their true identity is. Don't take too much time. She leaned back into her chair and reached out one elegant hand to the vine it curled at her side. A bud sprouted and bloomed, a long stem crowned with yellow petals that gleamed golden in the firelight. She plucked that flower and held it out to the witch before her, whose fingers trembled, not with fear, but with honor. "Thank you, lady. Blessings to you. And you." The witch left with hurried steps, and she breathed in the scent of roses and smoke, of green things and flames, her 2 favorite things, the fuel and the fire, the eater and the eaten, who could love only one and not the other. "I'll find you," she whispered, "and you'll never know who it was who plucked you off the face of the earth. You and your family, you and your entire vine burned, and your roots dug up to wither in the sun." Another yellow rose bloomed, and she laughed as she lifted it to her face and breathed it in, sweet, so very sweet.